The green light on my webcam blinked to life as I joined the Zoom call. Third round interview with Google. Senior software engineer position. 6 figures. The job that would finally get me out of my parents' house and away from their suffocating control. Good morning, Zara. The interviewer's smile was warm and genuine. I'm David Park, engineering manager for the cloud platform team. Ready to dive in? Absolutely, I said, forcing my hands to stop shaking. Thank you so much for. The door behind me burst open. My stomach plummeted as my mother's voice rang out, pitched loud enough for the camera to catch every word. Is this the GOGLE person? I need to speak with them right now. Mom, no, I spun in my chair, but she was already pushing into frame, Dad right behind her. You must stop this interview immediately, Mom announced to my screen. She's too mentally ill to work. She can't handle a job like this. David's expression shifted from confusion to concern. I'm sorry, who are you? Her parents, her caregivers, Dad emphasized, leaning into view. We keep her medicated for everyone's safety. She's not stable enough for employment, especially not at a big company. Get out, I hissed, trying to push them away. This is illegal. You can't. She has bipolar disorder. Mom spoke over me, enunciating each word like a verdict. Severe type. She hears voices. She's violent. Last month she tried to burn the house down. That's not true. My voice cracked. None of that is true. See how agitated she gets? Dad gestured at me like I was an exhibit. This is exactly what we mean. She can't handle stress. What happens when she snaps at your office? When she has an episode. We're trying to protect you from a lawsuit. I lunged for my laptop to end the call, but Mom grabbed my wrist. Hard. The same grip she used since I was 12, whenever I tried to speak up for myself. She's off her medication right now, she continued to David, who sat frozen on screen. Refuses to take it, says we're controlling her. Classic paranoid delusion. I'm not on medication because I'm not mentally ill. The words ripped from my throat. Denial is part of her condition, Dad said sagely. We've dealt with this for years. The delusions, the violence, the compulsive lying. Did she tell you she graduated from Stanford? She didn't. Did she claim she worked at Microsoft? Also a lie. Her resume is pure fantasy. David cleared his throat. Mr. and Mrs. Okafor, we're just trying to save your company from making a terrible mistake. Imagine when she has a breakdown in your office. Imagine the liability. I see. David's voice was carefully neutral, and you felt it necessary to interrupt this interview to share this information. Someone had to. Mom's grip on my wrist tightened. She's been applying to jobs secretly. We've had to call several companies to warn them. It's our responsibility as her caregivers. Your responsibility, David repeated slowly. Tell me, do you have medical power of attorney over Zara? Both my parents blinked. What? Legal documentation, stating that Zara is mentally incompetent and you have authority to make decisions for her. Well, no, Dad admitted. But as her parents, she appears to be an adult. Living in your home, but legally an adult. Correct? She's 27, Mom said, like it was shameful. Still living at home because she can't take care of herself. Because you won't let me leave. I finally wrenched free from Mom's grip. You hide my documents. You track my phone. You sabotage every. See? Mom turned back to the camera. The paranoia. We don't hide anything. She loses things because of her condition. Mrs. Okafor, David's voice cut through her performance. I need to inform you that this interview is being recorded. It's Google policy for all final round interviews. Everything you've just said is on record. The color drained from Mom's face. Additionally, he continued, interfering with someone's employment opportunities through false statements could be considered defamation, especially if that person has documented proof that contradicts your claims. We're not lying, Dad blustered. She's sick. Tell him about the medication, Zara. Tell him about Dr. Hoffman. Dr. Hoffman hasn't been my doctor for 15 years, I said quietly. Not since he lost his license for over-medicating teenage patients. Remember? You kept taking me to him anyway. Paid cash, so there'd be no insurance trail. You needed those medications. I was 12. I was sad because Grandma died. That's not bipolar disorder. That's grief. Mr. Park, Mom pivoted back to the screen, desperation creeping into her voice. You don't understand what we deal with. The calls we get. The complaints. Just last week. What calls? I interrupted. What complaints? Name one. Your boss at the library said that I was Employee of the Month 4 times. I pulled up the certificates on my phone, holding them to the camera. That I reorganized their entire digital system. That I trained 3 new employees. What exactly did she complain about? Silence. David leaned forward slightly. Zara, do you have your Stanford transcripts available? Right here. I had everything ready, knowing I'd need proof. I screen shared my official transcript. Summa cum laude. Dean's list every semester. And here's my Microsoft verification letter. 2 years as a junior developer, left for a startup that got acquired by Amazon. Here's that paperwork too. Those could be forged, Dad said weakly. They're linked directly from the official websites, David noted. I can see the URLs. Ms. Okafor, what medications are you currently taking? None, I said firmly. I take vitamin D and occasionally melatonin for sleep. That's it. I can provide a recent medical evaluation if needed. She's lying, Mom insisted. Check her room. Pills everywhere. The only pills in my room are aspirin and vitamins. You're welcome to verify that. In fact, I stood up, laptop in hand. Let's check right now. I walked to my dresser, streaming everything, and opened my pill organizer. 7 compartments, clearly labeled. Vitamins, calcium, iron. This proves nothing, Dad said. She hides the real medications. Where? You search my room weekly. You go through my trash. You read my journals. Where exactly am I hiding these medications? David's expression had shifted from concern to something else. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. Ms. Okafor, he said carefully. Have you ever been convicted of a crime? No. Ever been hospitalized for mental health reasons? No. Well, yes, when I was 12. For 2 weeks, after my parents told doctors I was suicidal. I wasn't. I was keeping a journal about feeling sad, and they said that was suicidal ideation. Have you ever threatened anyone at work? Never. Had any performance issues, conflicts with colleagues? No, I can provide references from every position. She's very good at hiding it, Mom jumped in. That's part of the illness. She seems normal, but... Mrs. Okafor. David's voice was sharp now. I've interviewed hundreds of candidates. I've also dealt with individuals who have various mental health conditions. What I'm seeing here isn't someone in psychological distress. What I'm seeing is someone whose parents are actively sabotaging their career. How dare you? I dare because it's true, and it's recorded. Every word. Every accusation. Every lie. We're not lying, Dad shouted. She's sick. She needs help. We're protecting her. From a 6-figure job? David asked mildly. From independence? From a life outside your control? You don't know her like we do. Mom's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. You don't know what she's capable of. What am I capable of, Mom? I turned to face her directly. Tell him what terrible thing I've done. She glared at me. The fire. You mean when I lit a candle for Diwali in my own room, that you claimed was arson? The violence. When I locked my door to stop you from reading my diary, and you called the police saying I was barricaded and dangerous. The lying. About what? Name one lie. One single thing I've lied about. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Dad stepped forward. We're your parents. We know what's best for you. No, I said quietly, you know what's best for you. Keeping me here. Keeping me small. Keeping me dependent. Because if I leave, who's going to clean your house? Who's going to cook your meals? Who's going to be your retirement plan? That's the illness talking, Mom said, but her voice wavered. Is it? Or is it the truth you don't want to hear? David cleared his throat. I think I've seen enough. Ms. Okafor, are you in a safe situation? Do you need resources? The word stuck. Was I safe? I'd lived like this so long, I didn't even know anymore. We would never hurt her, Dad said indignantly. Physical violence isn't the only kind of harm, David replied. Ms. Okafor, Google has partnerships with several organizations that help people in controlling family situations. I can send you information after this call. You're overstepping, Mom hissed. This is family business. You made it my business when you crashed this interview. He turned back to me. Zara, I'm going to end the formal interview here, but I want you to know something. Your technical assessment was flawless. Your system design was innovative. Your behavioral interviews showed leadership, empathy, and resilience, especially resilience. Tears burned my eyes. Thank you. We'll be in touch within 48 hours with next steps. And Zara? That door is still open. The call ended. Silence filled my room like water. Then Mom laughed, sharp and bitter. Well, how's that then? No way they'll hire you now. Not after seeing how unstable our family is. Unstable, I repeated. Our family is unstable. Not me, our family. Don't twist my words. I'm not twisting anything. You just told a Google hiring manager that I'm dangerously mentally ill. You have no proof. No documentation. No evidence. Just your word against mine. And it's all recorded. So what? Dad scoffed. You think they'll hire you after this circus? Maybe, maybe not. But at least now there's evidence. Legal evidence. Of what you do. Of how you lie. Of how you've sabotaged every opportunity I've ever had. We're trying to protect you. From what? I screamed, 15 years of frustration erupting. From success? From independence? From a life that doesn't revolve around you? From yourself, Mom said coldly. You're nothing without us. You know that. Who else would tolerate you? Who else would care for you? I guess we'll find out. I started packing. Not much. They'd know if I took too much. Just essentials. Documents I'd hidden in a tampon box because they'd never look there. The emergency cash I'd saved from online tutoring they didn't know about. My laptop. Where do you think you're going? Dad blocked my door. Out. With what money? What car? What plan? I'll figure it out. You'll be back by dinner, Mom said confidently. You always come back. Remember when you tried to leave for college? For that internship? For that apartment? You came crawling back every time. Because you sabotaged me every time. Called my landlords. Told my roommates I was dangerous. Froze my bank accounts. But this time is different. Why? Because this time I have proof. This time, a Fortune 500 company has a recording of you admitting to sabotaging my employment. This time, if you try to stop me, I'll send that recording to every family member, every friend, every person at your church. I'll post it online. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you are. Dad stepped aside. As I passed, he grabbed my arm. Not hard, just enough to remind me he could. You'll regret this, he said quietly, when you're alone, when you fail, when you realize we were right all along. Maybe, I said, but at least it'll be my failure, my choice, my life. I walked out with one backpack and 15 years of suppressed dreams. My friend Amira picked me up 2 blocks away. I texted her from the bathroom during the interview disaster. She'd been waiting ever since. Your parents are psychos, she said as I collapsed into her car. Full psychos. I know. What's the plan? I don't know. Find a cheap motel. Apply for more jobs. Hope Google doesn't blacklist me. Try to survive. Motel? She snorted. You're staying with me. Non-negotiable. Amira. Non-negotiable. My couch has your name on it until you get your Google offer. You think they'll still hire me after that? She grinned. Babe, are you kidding? You just showed them you can handle the worst possible stress with grace. You fact-checked your abusers in real time. You stayed professional while your parents tried to destroy your life on camera. If that's not Google material, I don't know what is. My phone buzzed. Email from David Park. Dear Zara, I wanted to reach out immediately following our interrupted interview. First, I want to assure you that your parents' interruption has no bearing on our assessment of your candidacy. If anything, your composure under such circumstances only reinforces our impression of your capabilities. I'm expediting your case to our urgent hiring committee. Additionally, I'm attaching resources for individuals dealing with family control and coercive situations. Google takes employee safety seriously, and that includes prospective employees. We'll be in touch within 24 hours instead of the standard 48. Also, off the record, your parents' claims were clearly fabricated. Anyone who's actually worked with individuals with mental health conditions would recognize the difference between genuine symptoms and parental manipulation. I'm sorry you've endured this. Best, David. I read it 3 times before it sank in. Well? Amira demanded. There, expediting my case. To urgent hiring. She whooped so loud I jumped. I told you. Google knows talent when they see it, and toxic parents when they crash interviews. My phone rang. Mom. I declined and blocked the number. Then Dad. Block. The house line. Block. For the first time in 15 years, I wouldn't be taking their calls. Wouldn't be explaining myself. Wouldn't be apologizing for existing. 22 hours later, the offer came through. Senior software engineer. $180K base, plus stock, plus signing bonus. Enough to live alone. Enough to get therapy. Enough to build the life they tried to steal. I accepted immediately. The first person I told was David Park, who responded with a smiley face emoji and welcome to the team. Can't wait to work with someone who can handle any situation. The second was Amira, who screamed and cried and immediately started looking up apartments in your Google's campus. I didn't tell my parents. They'd find out eventually, probably when they tried to claim me on their taxes and discovered I'd filed independently, or when they called Google to warn them again and learned I was already thriving there. But that's future Zara's problem. Present Zara is too busy living her allegedly impossible life. Turns out I'm perfectly capable of working, succeeding, and existing without their control. Who would have thought? Everyone except them, apparently. Their loss, my freedom. My life finally beginning at 27. Better late than never.
The envelope was thin, cream-coloured, and trembled in my hand. No return address, just my name, Quinn Shepherd, scrawled in a careful, almost childish hand. I was 30 years old, and I hadn't seen anything from that side of my family in 17 years. Not since the day my mother, Margaret, had decided I was no longer part of her perfect new life. Before we move on, tell me where you're watching from. I love mapping my viewers. I almost tossed it, honestly. My first instinct was to crumple it into a tight ball and send it straight to the recycling bin, just like I'd done with every Christmas card that had somehow slipped through her carefully constructed blockade in the early years. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the unfamiliar handwriting. Maybe it was the faint scent of lavender, a perfume Margaret used to wear, clinging to the paper like a ghost. Then I saw the name, scrawled faintly in the bottom left corner, almost hidden by the flap. Poppy. Poppy, my half-sister, the one I was never supposed to know, the one Margaret had built her new world around, erasing me from existence as if I were a smudge on a pristine white tablecloth. My stomach clenched. I slid a finger under the flap, careful not to tear the delicate paper. The words inside were neat, hesitant, but urgent. Dear Quinn, I know this is probably a shock. My name is Poppy. I'm 17. I know you're my sister. I just found out. My mum, Margaret, she told me you were unstable, dangerous, that you left. But I found some things, letters, old photos. Please, I need to talk to you. I don't know who else to trust. Can we meet somewhere far away? Please don't tell her. She can't know. Poppy. My vision blurred. Unstable, dangerous. That was Margaret's favourite narrative, her go-to explanation for why her firstborn child had simply vanished from her life. It was easier than admitting the truth, that I was a living, breathing reminder of a past she wanted to bury. The pain, sharp and familiar, sliced through me. It was the same pain I'd felt 17 years ago, the day Poppy was born. I was 13 then. My grandmother, Angela, had smuggled me into the hospital, her eyes full of a sorrow I only understood years later. Margaret, my mother, was in a private room, looking radiant and exhausted after giving birth. Just for a minute, sweetie, Angela had whispered, guiding me towards the bassinet. I'd peered over the edge. my heart aching with a tenderness I hadn't known I possessed. A tiny, perfect bundle swaddled in a pink blanket. Her eyes were closed, her tiny fists curled. I reached out a hand, wanting nothing more than to touch her, to feel the warmth of her skin. My baby sister. But Margaret's voice, sharp and cold, cut through the quiet room. Don't touch her, Quinn. She's not yours. Angela had flinched. I'd frozen, my hand hovering inches from the baby's face. Margaret had looked at me with an expression I'd never forget, a mix of disdain and something close to fear. She'd looked at me like I was a mistake, a stain on her fresh start. A nurse, a kind woman with tired eyes, had gently taken my arm. Maybe you should wait outside, dear. Your mother needs rest. I'd backed away, tears stinging my eyes. The image of my mother's cold face burned into my memory. I never got to hold Poppy, never got to touch her. That was the last time I saw Margaret for years, and the last time I saw Poppy as a newborn. 2 weeks later, the divorce papers from my father, Lawrence Shepherd, were finalised, and Margaret had moved out of state with her new husband, Reuben Sanderson, taking her new baby with her. I was left with my father, who was more absent than present, and the gaping hole where my mother used to be. Now, 17 years later, this letter. Poppy reaching out. The girl I was never supposed to know, the one who was supposed to be Margaret's perfect, unblemished child. I reread the letter, my fingers tracing the hesitant lines. Somewhere far away, please don't tell her. A diner, 85 miles north, just off the highway. A place I'd passed 100 times but never stopped at. Perfect. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my keys, my phone, and a half-empty pack of cigarettes. The pain was still there, a dull ache beneath my ribs, but something else was stirring now. Something cold and calculating, a flicker of possibility. I drove through the night, the hum of the engine a steady rhythm against the chaotic drumming of my thoughts. The memory of Margaret's face, the one that had haunted my nightmares for years, was sharp and clear. But now, it wasn't just pain. It was a question, a challenge. The diner sign, a faded neon glow against the pre-dawn sky, appeared exactly where Poppy had said it would be. My headlights cut through the gloom, illuminating a lone figure hunched in a booth by the window. She had her back to me, but even from a distance I could see the slight tremor in her shoulders. I took a deep breath, pushed open the heavy glass door, and walked inside. She looked up, her head snapping towards the sound. And when I saw her, God, she had my eyes. She had my eyes. The same shade of deep hazel flecked with gold, though hers held a wide-eyed innocence mine had lost somewhere around my 13th birthday. Poppy, my 17-year-old half-sister, looked exactly like the Margaret I remembered from before the coldness set in, but with a softness around the edges, a vulnerability that Margaret had long ago shed. "Quinn?" Her voice was a hesitant whisper, barely audible over the clatter of plates from the diner kitchen. I slid into the booth opposite her, the worn vinyl sighing beneath me. "Poppy." My voice felt rough, unused to saying her name out loud. She chewed on her lip, her gaze flitting around the nearly empty diner before settling back on me. "Thank you for coming. I didn't know if you would." "Why wouldn't I?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. 17 years of silence had built a wall around me, and it wasn't easy to dismantle. "You're my sister." Her eyes welled up, and she quickly blinked, trying to compose herself. "Mum said..." "She said you were unstable, that you had problems, that you just left one day and never looked back." I leaned forward, my elbows on the table. She lied about everything. And then I started talking. I told her about the holidays I spent alone with my father, Lawrence, who was more a ghost than a parent, while Margaret built a new, perfect family. I told her about the phone calls that went unanswered, the messages that were never returned, the emails that bounced back with a recipient unknown error. I told her how, after Angela died when I was 15, Margaret had changed her number, moved house again, and effectively cut me off entirely. I told her about the years of trying, the years of hoping, and then the slow, bitter realization that I had been erased. Poppy listened, her face paling with each sentence. The innocence I'd seen in her eyes began to crack, replaced by a dawning horror. Her perfectly manicured hands, so unlike my own calloused ones, trembled as she gripped her mug of lukewarm coffee. "But why?" she finally whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Why would she do that?" "Because I was a reminder," I said, the words tasting like ash. A reminder of a life she wanted to forget. A life with my father, a life before Reuben. You were her fresh start, her perfect child. She shook her head, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "I found them in her old jewellery box, hidden under some costume pearls." She fumbled in her bag, pulling out a small, worn, leather-bound journal. "They're scans." I didn't want to take the originals. She slid a tablet across the table. The screen glowed, displaying a scanned image of a letter. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. Angela's, my grandmother. "My dearest Quinn," the letter began. "I know things are hard right now. Your mother is complicated. She's made her choices, but never forget you are loved. Never forget you are my granddaughter. I will always fight for you, even when others won't. Hold on to your strength, my girl. This too shall pass." There were dates on the scans, letters written to me from Angela after Margaret had started her campaign of silence, letters written when I was 13, 14, even one dated just weeks before Angela passed away when I was 15, letters I never received. Margaret had intercepted them all. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Angela had tried to reach me, had tried to tell me I was loved, and Margaret had stopped it. Poppy scrolled through more images. And these? The next images were family photos, Margaret and Reuben smiling, a younger Poppy, maybe 5 or 6, riding a pony, holidays, birthdays, school events. But in several, I saw it, the faint outline where a figure had been, a jagged tear, a clumsy scissor cut right through the middle of a group shot. My image literally cut out, erased. A cold rage, sharper than any pain, began to bloom in my chest. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about Angela, about the truth she tried to tell, about the lengths Margaret went to maintain her lie. And it was about Poppy, who had been raised in a gilded cage of deceit. "She cut me out," I murmured, my voice flat. "Literally." Poppy nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I don't know what to do. My whole life. It's a lie. She's a lie." I looked at her, really looked at her. Her face was smudged with tears, her hair a mess, but there was a fierce, determined glint in her hazel eyes, the same glint I saw in the mirror every morning. This wasn't just a reunion. This was an opportunity, not just to heal, but to make Margaret face every single thing she had tried to bury. "Poppy," I said, my voice low, steady, "what else did you find?" She hesitated, then leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I have access to everything, the house, the guest list. The will. I have access to everything, the house, the guest list, the will." Poppy's whisper hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken possibilities. We spent the next few hours huddled in that diner booth, the coffee growing cold, the rising sun painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and orange. We sketched out a plan, raw and ambitious. Sunday dinner next weekend. Poppy's 18th birthday was coming up in a few months, so a birthday dinner was a perfect, innocent cover. Margaret loved a good performance, and Poppy's milestone birthday would be a prime opportunity for her to play the doting mother. "We need proof," I told Poppy, my mind already racing. "Not just your word, not just my word, hard evidence." Poppy nodded, her eyes still red-rimmed but now alight with a fierce determination. "I can get it. I know where she keeps everything." Back in my apartment, the first person I called was Zlata. "My best friend, my rock," she answered on the second ring, her voice raspy with sleep. "You're up early, Trouble," she grumbled. "What fresh hell are you brewing?" "You won't believe it," I said, and then I told her everything. About the letter, about Poppy, about the cut-out photos and Angela's intercepted letters, about the plan for Sunday dinner. Zlata was silent for a long moment. Then, "Holy hell, Quinn, this is biblical." She paused. "So, what's the play? You just show up?" "No," I said, a cold smile touching my lips. "We don't just show up. We make her face it, every single lie, every single thing she tried to erase." "Good," Zlata said, her voice sharpening. "But you need to be smart. Document everything, every lie she's told, every piece of paper, every conversation. You need a burn file, Quinn. Something that can't be denied." That's when Poppy called me. "Quinn, I got something." She'd gone home, acted normal, and then, with a cunning I hadn't expected from her, she'd managed to manipulate Margaret into leaving a voicemail. "I was talking about you," Poppy explained, her voice low and conspiratorial over the phone. "I said I was feeling down, missing a friend who'd moved away, and I mentioned how some people just disappear from your life, like a disease. She just ran with it." I played the audio file Poppy sent me. Margaret's voice, smooth as silk, dripping with feigned sympathy. "Oh, darling, sometimes people are just toxic, like a disease, really. You cut them out and you heal, you thrive. It's for the best, believe me." My stomach churned. She wasn't talking about some random friend. She was talking about me, calling me a disease. Poppy had baited her, and Margaret had swallowed it whole. This was gold. A few days later, I was meeting Zlata for coffee. We were going over the list of potential guests for the dinner, trying to identify who might be sympathetic, who might be a flying monkey for Margaret. "You know who might be useful?" Zlata mused, stirring her latte. "Your uncle, Ricardo Barnes, Margaret's half-brother, my maternal uncle. I hadn't seen him since I was a kid. He was a failed artist, always chasing some new get-rich-quick scheme. I knew he and Margaret had a strained relationship, mostly because he'd been cut out of Angela's will too, after Margaret had taken control of her affairs. "Why Ricardo?" I asked. "He's been trying to get in touch with you for years, you know," Zlata said, her eyes narrowed. "He's called me a few times, asking about you. I always shut him down, figured he was just after something. But now, he might have something for you." Before I could ask more, a man slid into the empty chair at our table. He was 42, Ricardo's age, with a slightly rumpled suit and a slicked-back ponytail that looked like it belonged on someone 20 years younger. Ricardo. "Quinn," he said, a wide, practiced smile on his face. "It's been too long. Zlata here finally decided to give me the time of day." He glanced at Zlata, who gave him a tight, unamused smile in return. "I hear you're planning a little family reunion." My gaze flicked to Zlata. She shrugged subtly. "He's persistent." "I am," Ricardo confirmed, his smile not wavering, "especially when there's an opportunity to right a few wrongs, and perhaps, shall we say, rebalance the scales of justice." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "I have proof, Quinn, proof that Margaret manipulated Angela's will. She cut you out, legally, and me too, for that matter. She forged Angela's signature on a codicil, claiming Angela was of unsound mind and wanted to disinherit us both just before she died. But Angela wasn't unsound. She was sharp as a tack. And I have the original untampered will, the one that left a significant portion to you and a smaller, but still substantial, amount to me. My breath hitched. Angela had tried to provide for me. Margaret had stolen it. Not just my family, but my inheritance. This was more than just emotional revenge now. This was fraud. So, Ricardo continued, his eyes gleaming with a mix of greed and genuine grievance, I hear there's a dinner next weekend, a birthday celebration. I'd be delighted to attend. As a surprise guest, of course. I looked at Zlata, then back at Ricardo. He was a snake, but he was a snake with a very sharp fang. And he had the one thing we needed most, undeniable proof. Fine, I said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across my face. Be there. Sunday. Next weekend. Chaos, it seemed, was about to bloom. Later that night, sifting through the box of Angela's letters Poppy had scanned, I found it, tucked away at the very bottom, beneath a stack of old photos, was a single, unopened envelope. The paper was thicker, the wax seal unbroken, embossed with Angela's distinctive family crest. My name wasn't on it. Instead, in Angela's elegant, slightly shaky script, it read, To the second daughter I loved. The wax seal cracked with a faint whisper, a sound like a secret finally exhaling. The letter addressed to the second daughter I loved wasn't for Poppy. It was for me. Angela, my grandmother, had written it for Margaret. My hands trembled as I unfolded the brittle paper. Angela's handwriting, usually so elegant, was shaky here, imbued with a desperate urgency. Margaret, the letter began, stark and without preamble. I know what you are doing. I know you are keeping Quinn from me, from her sister. You believe you are building a new, perfect life, but you are tearing apart the one you already have. Quinn is not a mistake. She is my granddaughter, and she deserves to know she is loved, not erased. My eyes scanned ahead, my breath catching in my throat. I have tried to make amends for your cruelty. I have instructed my lawyer to ensure Quinn is provided for, despite your attempts to control my affairs. She is to receive a substantial portion of my estate, a portion you have tried to deny her. I know you will try to stop this. You will try to manipulate and lie, as you always do. But I have made arrangements. There is a copy of my true will, the one that reflects my final wishes, hidden. It ensures Quinn's future, and it exposes your deceit. When you lose them both, Margaret, it won't be by force. It will be by your own consequence. You cannot erase the truth forever. Enclosed, tucked within the folds of the letter, was a second, smaller document. A will, not a copy, but an original, signed and witnessed. It was dated just weeks before Angela's death, and it explicitly named me, Quinn Shepherd, as a significant beneficiary, along with a smaller but still substantial amount for Ricardo. It directly contradicted the version Ricardo had described, the one Margaret had presented as Angela's final wishes. My head spun. Angela had known, she had known Margaret would try to cut me out, and she had fought for me even from her deathbed. The sheer audacity of Margaret, to intercept this, to hide it, to forge a new one, was breathtaking. Was this legally binding? Unclear. But it was real. It was Angela's truth, and it was devastating. I forwarded the scans of Angela's letter and the hidden will to Poppy, along with a short text. She knew. She fought for us. The next few days were a blur of planning and tension. Poppy, still living under Margaret's roof, was walking a tightrope. She'd text me updates, snippets of conversations, her emotional state fluctuating wildly. She just acts so normal, Poppy texted one afternoon. Like none of this is happening. It makes me sick. I knew the feeling. Margaret was a master of the facade. Poppy's breaking point came 2 days before the dinner. She'd tried to talk to Reuben. Not about me, not directly, but about her growing unease, about feeling like things weren't right, about a vague sense of unease about their family history. He just brushed me off, Poppy recounted later, her voice raw with hurt. Said I was being dramatic, that I was overthinking things. He said Margaret was under a lot of stress and I needed to be more understanding. He just doesn't see it, Quinn, or he doesn't want to. Her trust in the perfect family and the father figure who had raised her was fracturing. The golden child was seeing the rust beneath the shine. Later that day, Poppy was in the study, trying to compose herself when Margaret walked in. "Poppy, what's wrong, darling? Why are you crying?" Margaret's voice was laced with concern, a perfect performance. Poppy, quick on her feet, managed to pull herself together. "Oh, Mom, nothing, just thinking about Angela. I miss her, and I found some of her old things, some letters. It just made me sad." Margaret's eyes narrowed, a flicker of suspicion in their depths. "Letters? What letters?" "Oh, just old ones," Poppy said, waving a dismissive hand. "From when she was younger, nothing important, just sentimental." She even managed a watery smile. "I'm fine, really. Just a moment of weakness." Margaret, seemingly satisfied, patted Poppy's shoulder. "Well, don't dwell on the past, dear. It's not healthy. We have so much to look forward to." Poppy's gaslighting had worked. She'd deflected Margaret's suspicion, turning her own emotional turmoil into a cover. But the encounter had shaken her. That evening I got another text from Poppy. "She's talking to Reuben in secret. I overheard a little. She said, 'We can't let her see that girl again.' She's talking about you, Quinn. She knows something's up." The net was tightening. Margaret was sensing a disturbance in her perfectly ordered universe. I picked up my phone, my fingers flying across the keypad. "Don't worry," I texted Poppy back. "I've already called a lawyer." Just in case, the day before the dinner, or, as Poppy had cleverly spun it to Margaret, the surprise birthday breakfast she was organising for her mom. A cover, a distraction, something to make Margaret feel in control. The actual plan, the real reckoning, was set for Sunday dinner. Poppy had sent out the invites, a flurry of texts and emails to extended family, cousins, aunts, uncles, anyone Margaret would want to impress. The guest list was long, a testament to Margaret's carefully curated image. My own day was a whirlwind of nervous energy. I'd spent hours going through old boxes in my apartment, things I'd dragged from my father's house when I finally moved out at 18. Mostly junk, old school papers, faded photographs. But then tucked away in a dusty shoebox, I found it. My old flip phone from high school. The kind that stored voicemails directly on the device, not on a cloud. I'd kept it for years, a strange sentimental attachment to a time before everything truly fell apart. I charged it, my heart pounding a rhythm against my ribs. And there they were, a string of voicemails from Lawrence, my father, from the months leading up to and immediately after Margaret's divorce from him, when Poppy was a baby. His voice, so rarely heard, was strained, desperate. "Quinn, it's Dad. Call me back, please. She's making things difficult. She's threatening to take everything if I don't agree to her terms. She says if I fight for you, she'll make sure I lose my job, my reputation. She'll make sure I never see you again. I don't know what to do, kiddo. I'm so sorry." Another message. Weeks later. She's saying if I don't sign the papers, she'll accuse me of things that aren't true. I can't risk it, Quinn. I can't lose everything. She's got me over a barrel. I'm so sorry. I love you, kiddo. Always. The messages continued. A timeline of his capitulation, his fear. He hadn't abandoned me. He'd been blackmailed. Margaret had systematically dismantled his life, threatening to ruin him if he didn't give her what she wanted. A clean break, a new identity, free of any ties to her past, including me. I sank onto the floor, the old phone clutched in my hand. For 17 years, I'd carried the weight of his perceived abandonment. The quiet resentment that he hadn't fought for me hadn't been strong enough. I'd built an entire emotional wall around that belief, a fortress of cynicism and self-reliance. And now it was crumbling. Margaret, always Margaret. She hadn't just disowned me, she'd engineered my father's absence too. She hadn't just erased me from her life, she'd erased me from his. The lies went deeper, spread wider than I had ever imagined. My entire understanding of my past, of my relationships, was built on her carefully constructed deceit. An emotional spiral. That's what Zlata called it when I finally called her, my voice thick with unshed tears. She got him, Zlata. She got him too. She blackmailed him. He didn't just let me go. Zlata listened patiently, her usual sarcasm replaced by a quiet understanding. Quinn, listen to me. This isn't a spiral. This is clarity. This is seeing the full scope of her manipulation. It hurts, yeah, it's supposed to, but it also means you're not just fighting against a mother who abandoned you. You're fighting against a woman who systematically destroyed lives to build her perfect facade. But my whole life, I choked out, everything I thought I knew. Exactly, Zlata said, her voice firm. And now you know the truth. This isn't just about revenge against Margaret. This is about reclaiming your space, reclaiming your father's truth. Reclaiming your grandmother's truth. Reclaiming Poppy's truth. It's about being seen, Quinn. In a family that tried to erase you, you're not just taking her down, you're building yourself back up. Her words resonated, cutting through the fog of pain and betrayal. She was right. This wasn't just about making Margaret suffer. It was about tearing down the lies that had defined my life. And finally being seen. I spent the rest of the day converting Lawrence's voicemails into audio files, adding them to the growing burn file on my laptop. The intercepted letters from Angela, the cut-out photos, Margaret's disease voicemail, Ricardo's original will, and now my father's desperate pleas. The arsenal was complete. That evening, as the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, my phone buzzed. A text from Poppy. She found something. I think she knows. The morning of the dinner felt like the calm before a hurricane. Poppy's text from the night before. She found something I think she knows. Had coiled a knot of dread in my stomach. What had Margaret found? A stray text? A hidden note? Or had she simply sensed the shift in Poppy? The subtle tremor in her carefully constructed world. I dressed in a simple black dress, something understated but sharp. No point in trying to out-glam Margaret. My power wasn't in my clothes, it was in the truth I carried. Zlata had dropped off a small, discreet audio recorder no bigger than my thumb. Just in case, she'd said, her eyes serious. You never know what you'll need for the burn file. I clipped it to the inside of my sleeve. Poppy called me, her voice tight with nerves. She's acting normal, too normal. She just keeps asking if I'm excited for my birthday breakfast. It's creepy. Stay strong, I told her. Remember why we're doing this. I am, she whispered. I'm scared. Me too, I admitted, a rare moment of vulnerability. But the fear was quickly eclipsed by the cold, hard resolve that had been building inside me for 17 years. When I arrived, the Sanderson house was already bustling. Margaret's house, not my childhood home, but the grand, imposing structure she'd built her new life around. Cars lined the manicured driveway. Extended family members, faces I barely recognized from faded photographs or distant memories, milled about in the foyer, sipping mimosas. Margaret, at 54, was a vision of effortless elegance in a pale blue silk dress. Her silver hair was perfectly coiffed, her smile radiant, her eyes sparkling with the practiced charm of a woman who had mastered the art of illusion. She greeted each guest with a warm embrace, a perfect hostess. Reuben, 60 and looking every bit the oblivious, wealthy husband, hovered at her side, beaming. I spotted Poppy near the dining room, her back to me. She wore a simple gold locket, a delicate chain around her neck. As she turned, I saw it. Tucked inside, visible through the glass, was a tiny, faded baby photo. My baby photo. A picture of me as an infant taken by Angela before Margaret had started her campaign of erasure. Poppy was wearing it, hidden in plain sight, a silent declaration. My heart gave a strange lurch. Ricardo was there too, leaning against a doorway, nursing a glass of champagne, his eyes scanning the room with a predatory gleam. He caught my eye and gave a subtle nod. The snake was ready to strike. The moment came when Margaret clapped her hands, her voice ringing out, "Everyone, please, let's take our seats." Poppy has a little surprise for us. The dining room was vast, a polished mahogany table stretching the length of the room, set with Margaret's finest china and crystal. Everyone began to find their places. Poppy, her face pale but determined, walked over to me. She took my hand, her grip surprisingly firm. "Mom, Dad, everyone," she announced, her voice trembling slightly but clear. "I have a very special surprise guest for our family dinner." Margaret's smile faltered, a tiny crack in her perfect facade. Her eyes, usually so composed, darted to me, then back to Poppy. Reuben looked confused. Poppy led me to an empty seat directly across from Margaret. "This is Quinn," she said, her voice gaining strength. My sister." A hush fell over the room. Forks clinked against plates, then silence. Faces turned, confusion warring with recognition. Some of the older relatives, the ones who remembered me, gasped. Margaret's smile had vanished entirely, replaced by a mask of controlled fury. "Quinn," Reuben finally stammered, his brow furrowed. "But, Margaret, you said—" "I know this is a shock for some of you," I said, my voice steady, cutting through the stunned silence. My fingers brushed the discreet recorder under my sleeve. "But it's time for some truths to come out." I pulled out my phone, connecting it to a small portable speaker Poppy had set up, ostensibly for music. Poppy mentioned to me that our mother often talks about people who are toxic, like a disease. I wanted you all to hear exactly what she means. I pressed play. Margaret's smooth, elegant voice filled the room, amplified and chilling. "Oh, darling, sometimes people are just toxic, like a disease, really. You cut them out and you heal. You thrive. It's for the best, believe me." A ripple of murmurs went through the room. Margaret's face was stone, but her eyes were darting, searching for an escape. "And that's not all," Ricardo said, stepping forward, a thick envelope in his hand. "Some of you might remember Angela McCoy, Margaret's mother, my sister. She left a will, a very specific one, that was never honoured." He pulled out 2 documents. "This," he said, holding up one, "is the will Margaret presented after Angela's death, claiming Angela disinherited Quinn and me due to unsound mind. And this," he held up the other, "is the actual original will, signed and witnessed, leaving a substantial portion to Quinn and a smaller sum to me. Margaret forged a codicil. She committed probate fraud." Gasps erupted. Reuben's face was a mask of shock and betrayal. Margaret's hands, resting on the table, began to tremble, just barely. Her glass of wine, still untouched, vibrated with the tiny tremor. Then Poppy, her eyes blazing, reached for her locket. She unclipped it, holding it up for everyone to see. "And this," she said, her voice ringing with a new fierce clarity, "is a photo of me as a toddler with my sister Quinn, taken before our mother cut her out of our lives, before she cut her out of our family photos, before she tried to erase her from existence." The photo, small and faded, showed a tiny Poppy, maybe 2 years old, laughing, held in the arms of a smiling 13-year-old me. It was a moment frozen in time, a tangible piece of the past Margaret had tried to destroy. Margaret, for the first time, looked truly rattled. Her facade, so carefully maintained, was finally cracking. Her eyes, usually so cold and unreadable, flickered with something akin to panic. Her breath came in shallow gasps. Her glass of wine trembled violently. Finally she spoke, her voice low, raspy, but still laced with a chilling authority. "I knew this day would come, but you two haven't considered the price. I knew this day would come, but you two haven't considered the price." Margaret's voice was low, a dangerous hiss, yet it carried across the stunned silence of the dining room. Her eyes, usually so composed, burned with an icy fury. She finally pushed back from the table, rising to her full height, a queen dethroned but still regal in her rage. "You think you know everything. You think you've exposed some great truth." She laughed, a brittle, humourless sound that scraped against my ears. "The truth is, I was never meant to be a mother. I was trapped in a marriage I hated to a man I despised." Her gaze flicked to Reuben, then back to me, full of venom. "Quinn was my one mistake, a consequence of a life I desperately wanted to escape." My blood ran cold. She was saying it, out loud, the thing I'd always suspected, the unspoken truth that had festered in my gut for years. "And you, Poppy," Margaret continued, turning her gaze to my sister, her voice softening, but only barely. "You were my chance to do it right, to have a perfect family, a perfect child, free from the mistakes of the past. I saved you, Poppy. I saved you from that, from her." She gestured at me with a hand that trembled slightly. "I isolated her because I had to protect you, to protect us, to build the life we deserved." Reuben, who had been sitting in stunned silence, finally pushed his chair back with a screech. His face was a mottled red, a mixture of shock and profound humiliation. "Margaret, what are you saying? What is this?" "The truth, Reuben," Margaret spat, turning on him. "The truth you were too blind or too willfully ignorant to see. I built this for us, all of it." But Reuben wasn't listening. He stood, shaking his head, his eyes wide with a dawning horror. "My God," he whispered, looking from Margaret to me, then to Poppy, his perfect world shattering around him. He turned abruptly and stormed out of the dining room, his heavy footsteps echoing through the house. A few other relatives, older aunts and cousins who had known Margaret since childhood, began to rise, their faces etched with disgust. They didn't say a word, but their silent departure was a louder condemnation than any shout. The carefully curated guest list was thinning. Ricardo stepped forward, holding up the original will and Angela's condemning letter. "This isn't just about family drama, Margaret. This is probate fraud. This is a criminal offence. I've already spoken to a lawyer." "We're taking legal action," Margaret scoffed, a desperate attempt at her usual dismissive laugh. "Probate fraud? Don't be ridiculous, Ricardo. Angela was old. She was confused. This is nothing more than a desperate attempt to get your hands on money you don't deserve." She looked around the room, expecting someone to laugh with her, to rally to her side. No one did. The remaining guests stared at her with a mixture of pity and revulsion. Her perfect audience was gone. Poppy, who had been standing silently beside me, her face a mask of controlled fury, finally spoke. Her voice was clear, unwavering, cutting through Margaret's bluster. "You made sure I was your perfect child. You made sure I had everything. You made sure I believed every lie. But you didn't save me, Mum. You just made me blind. And now I see. I choose to be Quinn's sister. And you made me your enemy." The words hit Margaret like a physical blow. Her eyes widened, a flicker of genuine shock replacing the anger. This was the golden child, the one she had moulded, the one she had believed was hers, utterly and completely. And Poppy had just chosen me. A guttural sound escaped Margaret's throat. Her hand shot out, a blur of pale silk and manicured nails, aimed straight for Poppy's face. I moved without thinking. My hand shot up, catching Margaret's wrist mid-air, my fingers clamping down hard. Her eyes, wide and wild, locked with mine. The air crackled with raw, untamed rage. For a split second we were locked in a silent, furious tableau, mother and daughter, two forces colliding. Then Margaret ripped her arm free, her face contorted with a primal scream of frustration and defeat. She turned, stumbled, and fled from the dining room, her silk dress rustling like angry whispers. We heard the rapid thud of her heels on the stairs, followed by the violent slam of a door upstairs, rattling the very foundations of the house. Silence descended once more, heavy and absolute. The remaining guests looked at each other, then at Poppy and me, before quietly excusing themselves, melting away like shadows. Soon, only Poppy, Ricardo and I remained in the vast, shattered dining room. I looked around the empty, opulent space. The crystal gleamed, the china was undisturbed, but the air was thick with the dust of shattered illusions. It was finally over. The performance was done. "It's finally over," I said, the words feeling strangely hollow, yet also profoundly true. Poppy, her eyes still wide, nodded slowly. She reached out, taking my hand, her grip still firm. We stood there for a moment, two sisters, finally together in the wreckage. Then, as my gaze drifted towards the heavy wooden door Margaret had fled through, I saw it. Leaning against the doorframe, almost hidden by the ornate moulding, was a small, cream-coloured envelope, sealed in red wax. The small, cream-coloured envelope, sealed in red wax, leaned against the doorframe, a final, silent accusation in the shattered quiet of the dining room. My heart hammered against my ribs as I picked it up. The wax seal, Angela's family crest, was unmistakable, no name on the front, but the scent of lavender, faint but persistent, clung to the paper. It was for Margaret, and it was from Angela. Poppy came to stand beside me, her breath catching as she saw the envelope. Ricardo, ever the opportunist, hovered nearby, his eyes sharp with curiosity. I broke the seal. The paper was crisp, the handwriting firm, unlike the shaky script of the last letter Angela had sent me. This was Angela's voice, clear and strong, speaking from beyond the grave. "Margaret," it began, just as the other letter had. "If you are reading this, it means you have finally faced the consequences of your actions. You have tried to erase Quinn, to deny her existence, to sever her ties to this family and to me. You have manipulated, you have lied, you have stolen. You have built your perfect life on a foundation of deceit and the broken hearts of others." My eyes scanned ahead, the words burning into my mind. "I tried to protect Quinn. I tried to ensure her future. I tried to show you the error of your ways. But you chose your path. You chose to be cruel. You chose to be selfish. You chose to believe that you could simply rewrite history and discard those who inconveniently reminded you of your past. Understand this, Margaret. When you lose them both, it won't be by force. It will be by your own consequence. You cannot erase the truth forever, and the truth, Margaret, always finds its way home. The letter ended there, a stark, damning indictment. It was Angela's final word, a posthumous condemnation of her daughter's betrayal. Margaret had hidden it, just as she had hidden everything else, hoping to bury the truth forever. But the truth, as Angela had promised, had found its way home. Weeks later, the dust began to settle, though the air still felt thick with the residue of shattered porcelain. Ricardo, true to his word, had initiated legal proceedings against Margaret, probate fraud among other charges. The original will, Angela's letter to Margaret, and the evidence of Margaret's manipulation of my father, Lawrence, formed a formidable case. The legal battle would be long and messy, but the damage to Margaret's pristine reputation was already done. The whispers had begun, and in her world, reputation was everything. Poppy, now 18, had moved out of Margaret and Reuben's house. She'd packed a single suitcase the morning after the dinner, leaving a short, terse note for Margaret. She stayed with Zlata for a few days, then found a small apartment near the university she planned to attend in the fall. We talked every day, sometimes for hours. She was still processing, still grieving the loss of the mother she thought she knew, but there was a quiet strength growing in her, a fierce independence I recognized. She was no longer the golden child. She was simply Poppy, forging her own path. We were building a quiet new life together. Reuben, humiliated and betrayed, filed for divorce. The news spread through their social circles like wildfire. He was a man who valued appearances above all else, and Margaret had publicly shattered his. He began the process of separating their assets, draining her credibility and reputation with every legal filing. The perfect facade Margaret had built with him was crumbling, brick by painstaking brick. One crisp autumn afternoon, Poppy and I drove to Angela's grave. It was a quiet cemetery bathed in the soft golden light of the setting sun. We stood there for a long time, side by side, the silence comforting. "She loved you," Poppy said softly, looking at the headstone. "She really did, even when Mom tried to stop it." "She loved you too," I replied, thinking of the letter addressed to the second daughter I loved, and how Angela had tried to protect both of us from Margaret's cruelty. I reached into my pocket, pulling out the gold locket Poppy had worn that day, the one with my baby photo inside. It was a symbol of everything Margaret had tried to erase, and everything we had reclaimed. With a small, sharp pair of clippers I'd brought, I carefully cut the locket in half. One half, with my baby photo, I handed to Poppy. The other half, empty but still bearing the faint imprint of the photo, I kept. We placed Poppy's half of the locket on Angela's headstone, a silent offering, a promise. It was a small gesture, but it felt monumental. A piece of our shared history finally laid to rest, and a new one beginning. Revenge doesn't fix the past. It doesn't erase the pain, or bring back the years stolen. But watching karma come home, watching the carefully constructed world of the woman who tried to erase me crumble under the weight of her own lies, that's something I'll never apologize for.
The first time I really understood I was the family ATM, I was 22. My brother Kingsley was turning 24, and he wanted a big party. My parents were always tight on cash, a phrase that usually meant they just bought a new boat or something equally unnecessary. So I, Andrea, fresh out of college and already pulling decent money as a junior consultant, offered to cover the venue. It wasn't just the venue, it was the catering, the open bar, the DJ. By the end of the night, I'd dropped almost $5,000. Kingsley, who is 31 now, clapped me on the back then, called me the best sister ever, and then promptly forgot about it. He still owes me for that, and a dozen other things besides. Before going further, drop your location in the comments. I'm curious about my global family. That was just the beginning. There was Taya's influencer trip to Milan 2 years ago, when she was 25 and I was 27. She needed seed money for content creation, which translated to me paying for her flights and half her hotel. She promised to pay me back once her brand partnerships took off. Spoiler, they didn't, not in a way that ever funneled money back to my bank account. Taya is 27 now, still chasing that influencer dream. Then there was Aunt Zella's new car, down payment last year, when she was 53 and I was 28. She'd cried about her old clunker, how unsafe it was. I'd transferred the money without a second thought, the responsible one always stepping up. Aunt Zella is 54 now. My cousin Sophia, 23 at the time, once needed a loan for a new laptop for school. Sophia is 24 now. It was always something, always me. So when my phone rang last Tuesday and Aunt Zella's name popped up, I already had a knot in my stomach. Her voice was dripping with that particular brand of sickly sweet concern she reserved for delivering bad news. "Andrea, darling," she cooed, "how are you, sweetie?" "I'm good, Aunt Zella. What's up?" I kept my tone neutral. I was 29 and I'd learned to read the subtext. "Well, you know the Paris trip. We're all so excited. It's going to be just wonderful." She paused, a dramatic sigh. "And we've been trying to figure out the logistics, and it's just so tricky with the budget this year, you know, and limited space at the hotel." My heart sank. I knew exactly where this was going. Every family trip, I was the one who made sure everyone had a bed, who booked the bigger car, who quietly covered the unexpected costs. Last year, I'd paid for double suites in Hawaii just so Taya could have the king bed to herself while I slept on the pull-out couch. But Paris was different. Paris was a dream. "Right," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. "What about it?" "Well, honey, we've had to make some really tough decisions," she continued, her voice practically dripping with false sympathy. "And with Taya bringing her new photographer, and Kingsley wanting to invite his new girlfriend, and Sophia needing her own room for her creative space." She trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air like a bad smell. "It just meant we had to really, really tighten the guest list, for budget reasons, you understand. And limited space. So I'm not invited," I stated, not a question. A beat of silence. "Oh, Andrea, it's not like that. It's just, we thought you'd understand. You're so practical. You always are. And we know how busy you are with work. This is more of a family bonding trip, you know? Just the core group. The core group who always needed my core bank account." I swallowed the bitter taste. "Right, I understand." "Oh, good, I knew you would. You're always so sensible." "We'll bring you back a souvenir," she chirped, clearly relieved I wasn't making a scene. "Thanks, Aunt Zella," I said, my voice flat. We hung up. I stared at my phone, the screen still lit with her contact photo. My chest felt hollowed out, a familiar ache. I'd always been the one they called when they needed something, but never the one they truly wanted around. Later that night, I was curled up on my couch, trying to lose myself in a documentary, when my phone buzzed. It was Jayla, my best friend since college. Jayla, also 29, and the only one who truly got it. Her text read, "Girl, you seeing this?" Attached was a photo, a group shot, Taya, Kingsley, Aunt Zella, Sophia, all grinning, champagne flutes raised. They were in an airport lounge, surrounded by what looked suspiciously like brand new designer luggage. Taya, of course, had already posted it to her story. Paris bound with the fam, so excited for some quality time. My blood ran cold. Limited space, budget reasons, Taya's new photographer, Kingsley's new girlfriend. None of them were in the photo, just the usual suspects, looking far too pleased with themselves. And that luggage. I recognised the pattern on Taya's carry-on. Chanel. I zoomed in on the photo, my finger tracing the outline of Taya's expensive bag. A cold, hard resolve settled in my gut, replacing the hurt. I whispered to myself, the words barely audible in the quiet apartment. Room in the budget for Chanel, though? My fingers moved, almost on their own, opening my laptop. I pulled up a flight booking site, then a luxury hotel chain. I knew which one they'd be staying at. They always went for the best deals that somehow always ended up being the most expensive, which I then inevitably subsidised. This time it would be different. This time I was booking for one. And I wasn't looking for a deal. The next few days were a blur of quiet, calculated action. While my family was probably already halfway across the Atlantic, toasting their budget-friendly trip with airport champagne, I was meticulously planning my own arrival. I didn't tell Jayla what I was doing, not yet. This was something I needed to execute in silence, a personal project. First, the flight. I pulled up my frequent flyer account. Years of business travel, countless red-eye flights, endless hotel stays. It had all accumulated. My family always assumed I flew economy, just like them, because I was sensible. They didn't know about the platinum status, the millions of miles I'd quietly hoarded, the upgrades I often declined because I was too tired to care. This time, I cared. I booked a first-class ticket, direct to Paris, for 2 days after their departure. The seat was practically a bed. I deserved it. Then, the hotel. I remembered Aunt Zella mentioning the limited space at their hotel. I knew which chain they favoured, the one with the decent loyalty programme that I'd always used for my work trips. A quick search confirmed it. The Grand Parisian, a 5-star property near the Louvre. I found the room types, the prices. My family, I knew, would have booked standard rooms, maybe a slightly larger one for Aunt Zella. I, however, wasn't looking for a standard room. My fingers hovered over the presidential suite option. It was exorbitant, but I had the miles and I had the cash. This wasn't about being sensible anymore. This was about being seen. I clicked confirm. As I packed, a memory surfaced, sharp and clear. Last year, the Hawaii trip. It was supposed to be a big family reunion. I'd offered to pay for everyone's accommodation, a gesture I now recognised as a desperate attempt to buy their affection. I'd booked 2 adjoining suites, both with king beds. When we arrived, Taya, then 26, had taken one look at the rooms and declared, "Oh, Andrea, you're so sweet, but I need the king bed for my content. The lighting is so much better in here." She'd pointed to the suite I'd mentally claimed for myself, the one with the ocean view. I, 28 at the time, had just nodded, too tired to argue, and ended up on the pull-out couch in the living room of the other suite. For a week. While Taya posted endless selfies from her king bed, captioning them, "Island life, living my best life." I remembered the springs digging into my back every night, the faint smell of mildew from the couch cushions, and the quiet resentment that had started to simmer. It wasn't just about the bed. It was about the assumption, the entitlement, the complete lack of consideration. Now, as I folded a silk dress into my designer luggage, a gift from a grateful client, not something I'd bought to impress anyone, I felt a different kind of resolve. This wasn't about anger, not really. It was about reclaiming something, my dignity, my worth, my peace. My revenge wouldn't be loud or dramatic. No screaming matches, no public confrontations. That was their style. Mine would be quiet, elegant, and utterly disarming. It would be saturated with grace, a series of subtle reminders of what they had so casually discarded. The day of my flight arrived. I checked in online, breezed through security, and settled into my spacious first-class seat. The flight attendant offered me champagne before we even took off. I smiled, a genuine smile this time. The hum of the engines was a soothing lullaby. I pulled out my tablet, not to work, but to open the hotel's app. I wanted to confirm my booking, just for peace of mind. I typed in the hotel name, then my reservation number. The details popped up. Andrea Warren, Grand Parisian, Suite 419, Presidential Tier. My eyes scanned further down the page. There was a section for group bookings. Out of curiosity, I typed in the family's last name. Sure enough, a list appeared. Zella Warren, Taya Warren, Kingsley Warren, Sophia Warren, and next to each name, a room number. All on the same floor, just a few doors down from each other. I scrolled back up to my own reservation. Suite 419. I knew the layout of these hotels. Suite 419 was the largest, most luxurious suite on the entire floor. It was directly next to their cluster of standard rooms. I closed the app, a slow, knowing smile spreading across my face. This was going to be better than I'd imagined. I arrived in Paris 2 days after my family, refreshed and surprisingly calm. Stepping out of the taxi at the Grand Parisian, the ornate facade rose before me, a testament to old-world luxury. I walked through the revolving doors, past the gleaming marble floors and crystal chandeliers, feeling a quiet confidence I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just a hotel, it was my stage. At the reception desk, a charming young man with impeccably styled hair greeted me. "Bonjour, Mademoiselle Warren. Welcome to the Grand Parisian." "We've been expecting you." "Bonjour," I replied, my French rusty but polite. "Andrea Warren checking in." He smiled, his eyes twinkling. "Ah, Mademoiselle Andrea, your suite is ready. Suite 419, the presidential tier. We've arranged for your luggage to be taken up immediately. Is there anything else I can assist you with?" I charmed him effortlessly, asking about the best local patisseries and the quietest spots for coffee. I made sure to mention casually that I was looking forward to a relaxing stay, perhaps by the pool later. I tipped him generously, a crisp €50 note discreetly palmed. His smile widened. "Of course, mademoiselle, the pool is quite lovely this time of day. We have a few cabanas available if you prefer privacy." "Perfect," I said. "Perhaps I'll see you later." My suite was everything I'd imagined and more. High ceilings, a sprawling living area, a separate bedroom with a king-size bed that looked like it could swallow me whole, and a marble bathroom bigger than my entire apartment back home. The view from the balcony overlooked the Seine, the Eiffel Tower, a majestic silhouette in the distance. I unpacked slowly, savouring every moment. This was what budget reasons had cost them. After settling in, I slipped into a plush white spa robe, thicker and softer than any hotel robe I'd ever encountered, and headed down to the pool. I knew my family would be there. Taya would be trying to get the perfect poolside selfie. Kingsley would be splashing around like a kid. Aunt Zella would be holding court, and Sophia would be giggling at Taya's jokes. I had timed my entrance perfectly. The pool area was bustling, but not overly crowded. I spotted them immediately. Their cabana was tucked away in a corner, just as I'd been told. Taya, in a bright pink swimsuit, was indeed posing for Sophia, who was holding up a phone. Kingsley was cannonballing into the shallow end, splashing Aunt Zella, who was already looking annoyed. I walked past them slowly, deliberately. My pace was unhurried, my head held high. The spa robe billowed slightly with each step, pristine white against the vibrant blues of the pool. My oversized sunglasses hid my eyes, but I could feel their gazes. I heard Kingsley's splash die down, Taya's laughter cut short. As I drew level with their cabana, I heard Aunt Zella gasp, a tiny choked sound. Taya's grip tightened around her wineglass, her knuckles white. I didn't break stride. I didn't acknowledge them. I just kept walking, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on my lips. I heard a whisper. "Is that Andrea?" from Sophia. I continued to the far end of the pool, where a lone cabana sat empty, slightly larger and more secluded than theirs. I settled in, ordered a fresh squeezed orange juice and opened a book, pretending to read. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw them. They were huddled together, whispering furiously, occasionally glancing over at me. Tyre had stopped posing. Aunt Zella looked pale. Kingsley was no longer splashing. The energy in their cabana had shifted from carefree vacation to bewildered confusion. That evening, after a leisurely dinner in my suite, I called the concierge. "Bonjour," I said. "This is Andrea Warren in suite 419. I'd like to send a few bottles of your finest rosé to the table occupied by the Warren family in the main dining room. Please tell them it's from suite 419. There was a slight pause on the other end, then a knowing chuckle. "Certainly, Mademoiselle Warren." An excellent choice, right away. I pictured their faces, the moment the waiter would approach their table, present the bottles, and deliver the message. It wouldn't be a grand gesture of forgiveness. It would be a quiet, elegant reminder. A ghost in the machine, a whisper of my presence, a taunt of my privilege, the first ripple in their carefully constructed facade. The next morning, I decided to treat myself to the hotel spa. It was an oasis of calm, scented with lavender and eucalyptus. I settled into a plush lounge chair after a swim, sipping cucumber water, feeling utterly serene. It wasn't long before my peace was disturbed. "Andrea, is that really you?" I opened my eyes slowly. Aunt Zella stood over me, her face a mixture of surprise and forced pleasantness. Her hair was wrapped in a towel, and she looked smaller somehow, without her usual layers of makeup and carefully chosen outfits. She was 54, and for the first time she looked it. "Aunt Zella," I said, my voice calm, almost bored. "What a surprise." She fidgeted, her eyes darting around the opulent spa. I can't believe you're here. I thought you said you were so busy." "I am busy," I replied, taking a slow sip of my water. "But I always make time for Paris. I come every summer, don't you?" Her jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. She knew perfectly well I didn't come every summer. This was my first time in Paris. But she also knew that I knew she was lying about the budget reasons for their trip. The implication hung heavy in the air. I can afford this whenever I want. You can't. A memory flashed, sharp and unwelcome. 5 years ago, when I was 24, Aunt Zella, then 49, had called me in a panic. Her mortgage payment was due and she was short. "Just a little help, darling," she'd pleaded, her voice thick with tears. "Just this once." "I'll pay you back, I promise." I'd felt a familiar pang of guilt, the weight of being the responsible one. I'd transferred the full amount, enough to cover her payment and then some. She never mentioned it again, let alone paid me back. That had been another brick in the wall of resentment I was slowly building. "Well," Aunt Zella finally managed, "it's just quite a coincidence, isn't it, that we're all here?" "Is it?" I smiled sweetly. "I suppose great minds think alike." She mumbled something about meeting Tyre and scurried off, clearly uncomfortable. I watched her go, a quiet satisfaction spreading through me. This was exactly what I wanted. Not a fight, but a subtle dismantling of their carefully constructed narrative. Throughout the day, these small acts of revenge continued, almost without my direct intervention. I saw the concierge, the charming young man from yesterday, greet me by name in the lobby, a warm smile on his face, right as Aunt Zella and Tyre walked past, looking disgruntled. They were clearly struggling with something. I overheard snippets of their conversation later, by the elevator. "They said there are no upgrades available," Tyre whined, "and I asked about a better view and they just laughed." Aunt Zella sighed dramatically. "It's ridiculous. For what we're paying." I walked past them, my head held high, a small knowing smile on my face. The concierge, seeing me, nodded deferentially. "Mademoiselle Warren, your car for this evening is confirmed for 7. Their heads whipped around. I just kept walking. Later that afternoon, I was enjoying a glass of champagne at the hotel bar, scrolling through my phone, when Kingsley, my 31-year-old brother, approached. He looked sheepish, a rare expression for him. He was usually the jokester, deflecting everything with a laugh. "Hey, Andrea, he said, pulling up a stool next to me. "Fancy seeing you here." "Kingsley?" I replied, my voice cool. "What a surprise." He tried to laugh it off, but it sounded forced. "Yeah, well, you know, Paris, family trip. Pretty cool, huh?" "Cool," I agreed, taking a sip of my champagne. He shifted uncomfortably. "Look, about the trip. Aunt Zella really tried to get you in, but it was just so tight, you know." "Budget and all that?" I looked him dead in the eye. "Kingsley, you still owe me for your 24th birthday party and the loan for your car repairs last year and the time you forgot your wallet at dinner." His face flushed. He opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. I caught the eye of the waiter passing by. "Excuse me," I said, handing him my card. "Dinner's on whoever didn't lie." I looked back at Kingsley, my gaze unwavering. He stared at my card in the waiter's hand, then back at me. He didn't argue. He just sat there, silent, the usual bravado completely gone. He knew I wasn't just talking about the trip. He knew I was talking about everything. And for the first time, he had no joke to deflect with. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a call from Jayla. "Okay, spill," she demanded, skipping any pleasantries. "What in the world is going on over there?" Tyre just posted some cryptic story about trust issues and family drama, and my DMs are blowing up with Sophia and our cousins asking what's up. I leaned back against the plush headboard of my king-sized bed, a croissant in one hand, coffee in the other. "Nothing much," I said, a small smile playing on my lips. "Just enjoying Paris, and apparently so is my family." "Andrea?" Jayla's voice was serious now. "Are you sure you're not getting lost in this?" "I get it, they're infuriating, but don't let their pettiness drag you down. This isn't about proving a point, is it?" "It's not about revenge, Jayla," I corrected her, my voice firm. "It's about truth. It's about them finally seeing what they've always chosen to ignore, what they've taken for granted. For years, I've been the quiet one, the reliable one, the one who just understands when they need money or a favour. This isn't about payback. It's about making them acknowledge the cost of their actions. It's about me reclaiming my value, not just my money." Jayla was silent for a moment. "Okay," she finally said, a note of understanding in her voice. "I get it. Just be careful. They're good at twisting things." She wasn't wrong. A few hours later, I saw Tyre's latest Instagram story. It was a selfie, her face artfully angled to look thoughtful, almost sad. The caption read, "Some people just can't handle genuine family love, always looking for drama where there's none. Trust issues are real, y'all. Key family first, positive vibes only." I rolled my eyes, the sheer audacity. As if I was the one with trust issues. I remembered the Milan trip 2 years ago. I was 27, Tyre 25. I'd paid for her flights, a significant chunk of her hotel, and even given her extra cash for expenses. She'd promised to pay me back from her brand partnerships. When I gently reminded her a few months later, she'd acted offended. "Andrea, it's not about the money. It's about supporting small content creators. Don't you want to see me succeed?" She turned it into my selfishness, my lack of support. I'd backed down as always, but not this time. Later that afternoon, I found myself back at the hotel bar. The same bartender from yesterday, a man with kind eyes and a subtle smattering of freckles, was polishing glasses. He looked up and offered a genuine smile. "Mademoiselle Warren," he said, his accent charming. "Welcome back. The usual?" "Please," I replied, taking a seat, "and just Andrea is fine." "Andrea," he repeated, testing the name. "I'm Brock Lewis." He was 32, I guessed, maybe 33. There was a quiet strength about him, a sense of having seen a lot. We fell into easy conversation. I ordered a glass of rosé and he started telling me about the hotel's history, the hidden gems of Paris. Without meaning to, I found myself confiding in him, a little. Not about the specifics of my family, but about the feeling of being taken for granted, the quiet exhaustion of always being the strong one. He listened, really listened without judgment. When I finished, he paused, then said, "You know, I see a lot of people come through here. Some are loud, some are quiet, but the ones who leave the biggest impression aren't always the ones making the most noise." He slid my rosé across the bar. "Power's not payback, it's being unbothered." His words hit me. Being unbothered, that was it. That was the core of what I was trying to achieve. Not to hurt them, but to show them that their actions no longer had the power to hurt me. As I was finishing my drink, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from the hotel. A personalised invitation to an exclusive spa sunset cocktail hour for select guests, happening that evening on the rooftop terrace. My suite number, 419, was prominently displayed on the invitation. I smiled. This was perfect. I knew my family wouldn't be invited. Their standard rooms wouldn't qualify them for such an exclusive event. I pictured them, downstairs in their regular rooms, probably bickering over dinner plans. And then I pictured them finding out about my cocktail hour. The thought of their faces, the dawning realization that I was not only here, but enjoying a level of luxury entirely separate from their own, was a sweet, quiet victory. This wasn't about revenge, jailer. This was about truth. And the truth, sometimes, was a very exclusive invitation. The Spa Sunset Cocktail Hour was everything the invitation promised and more. The rooftop terrace offered breathtaking views of the Parisian skyline, bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. Soft jazz music drifted through the air, and attentive staff circulated with trays of delicate canapés and sparkling drinks. I wore a simple, elegant black dress, feeling completely at ease. It wasn't long before the first of them tried to approach. Aunt Zella, 54, looking slightly out of place in a dress that seemed a bit too formal for a casual cocktail hour. She spotted me by the railing, a glass of champagne in my hand, gazing at the Eiffel Tower as it began to sparkle. "Andrea," she began, her voice a little too loud, a little too saccharine. "There you are. We were wondering where you'd disappeared to." I turned, a polite, distant smile on my face. "Aunt Zella, lovely party, isn't it?" She shifted, clearly uncomfortable. "Yes, well, it's very exclusive. We didn't even know about it." "Oh," I raised an eyebrow, "perhaps it's for guests in certain suites." The implication hung in the air, thick and undeniable. "Look, Andrea," she lowered her voice, a practised tone of maternal concern creeping in. "We're still family, you know. This whole thing, it's not like us. We should be enjoying Paris together." "Family," I repeated, my voice flat. "Family borrows and repays, Aunt Zella." "Liars take and disappear." Her eyes widened slightly. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The usual guilt trip wasn't working. She mumbled something about finding Kingsley and retreated, defeated. Next was Kingsley, 31. He approached me with a forced casualness, a drink in his hand. "Hey, Andrea, this is pretty swanky. Didn't know you were into these kinds of things." "There's a lot you don't know about me, Kingsley," I said, meeting his gaze. He tried the sincerity angle, something rare for him. "Look, I know you're mad about the trip, and yeah, maybe we messed up, but we're family. We always figure it out." "Do we?" I asked, a ghost of a smile on my lips. "Or do I always figure it out, and you all just benefit?" He fidgeted, his usual jokester demeanour completely gone. He had no witty comeback, no deflection. He just stood there, looking genuinely uncomfortable. It was almost sad, seeing him so stripped of his usual bravado. He eventually just nodded, mumbled, "Yeah, well," and walked away. As the evening progressed, I saw Sophia, 24, hovering near the entrance, clearly hoping to be let in. She kept glancing at me, then looking away when I met her eye. Taya, 27, didn't even try. She was too busy posting from their standard room, probably trying to make it look more glamorous than it was. I found myself gravitating towards the bar, where Brock, 32, was expertly mixing cocktails. He caught my eye and offered a warm smile. "Still unbothered, I see," he murmured, sliding a fresh glass of rosé towards me. "Working on it," I admitted, a genuine laugh escaping me. We talked for a while, about nothing in particular, just easy conversation. He asked about my work, I asked about his life in Paris. There was a subtle flirtation in his eyes, a gentle curiosity that was disarmingly pleasant. For the first time since this whole Paris saga began, I felt a flicker of something beyond the calculated satisfaction of revenge. A lightness, a possibility of a future where my worth wasn't tied to my family's approval or their financial needs. Just a blink, a momentary dream of something new. The party was winding down when a hotel staff member, looking flustered, approached me. "Mademoiselle Warren?" "I apologise, but there seems to have been a mistake." He held out a delicate bouquet of white roses, tied with a pink ribbon. These were meant for Mademoiselle Taya Warren, but they were mistakenly delivered to Suite 419. My eyes flickered to the card attached to the bouquet. It was from a new brand partnership Taya had been trying to secure. This was clearly meant to be a big moment for her, a public display of her success. Before I could respond, a furious voice cut through the air. "Those are my flowers!" Taya stood there, her face contorted in a mask of rage, her eyes blazing. She must have seen the staff member heading towards my suite and followed him. She looked dishevelled, clearly having rushed up from her room. I simply looked at the staff member, then back at Taya. I didn't say a word. I just took a slow, deliberate sip of my cocktail, the glass cool against my fingers. The roses, pristine and elegant, sat on the bar between us. Taya stood fuming, her carefully constructed influencer facade crumbling around her. The silence in the nearly empty bar was deafening. The next evening was the family's final group dinner, booked at a supposedly exclusive restaurant within the hotel. I hadn't been invited, of course, but I knew where they would be. I had made my own reservation for a table across the room, far enough to maintain my distance, close enough to observe. I arrived fashionably late, gliding into the elegant dining room. My family was already seated at a large round table, their faces grim. Taya, 27, looked particularly sullen, probably still stewing about the flower incident. Aunt Zella, 54, was picking at her bread, her usual matriarchal air diminished. Sophia, 24, kept glancing nervously around. Kingsley, 31, was the only one who even attempted to salvage the mood, trying to crack a joke that fell flat. I settled into my table, ordered a glass of champagne and watched them. They were avoiding my gaze, pretending I wasn't there. It was a familiar tactic, one they'd perfected over the years. The quiet exclusion, the subtle dismissal. I remembered countless dinners like this. The time I was 23, and Kingsley, then 25, had convinced me to cover his portion of a family vacation rental because he was between jobs. I'd paid, and he'd spent the entire week making fun of my sensible shoes. Or the Christmas when I was 26, and Aunt Zella, 51, had gushed over the expensive designer bag Taya, 24, had received, completely ignoring the thoughtful handmade gift I'd spent weeks crafting for her. It was never about the money, not really. It was about being seen, being valued, being acknowledged, and I was never any of those things. I finished my champagne, the bubbles doing little to lighten the heavy atmosphere. I caught the eye of the waiter, a different one from the bar, but equally professional. I gave him a subtle nod, then signalled for the bill. He approached my table discreetly. "Mademoiselle?" "Yes," I said, my voice clear, carrying just enough to reach their table. "Could you please put this dinner, the entire table's bill, to Suite 419? A hush fell over their table. Forks clattered against plates. Heads slowly turned. Their eyes, wide with shock, landed on me. I met their gazes, one by one. Aunt Zella's face was a mask of disbelief. Taya's jaw dropped. Sophia looked utterly bewildered. Kingsley, for once, had no joke, no quip. Then, before any of them could utter a word, before they could protest or thank me or try to twist it, I added, my voice calm and steady. Dinner's on whoever didn't lie. The weight of the moment crushed the table. The words hung in the air, echoing the sentiment I delivered to Kingsley at the bar. But this time, it wasn't just him. It was all of them. The budget reasons, the limited space, the family bonding trip that excluded me, the years of taking, of promising, of forgetting. The years of me being the silent backbone, the ATM, the one who always understood, who always forgave. No one spoke. No one offered to take my cue, to admit their deception. The silence was deafening, thick with unspoken accusations and dawning realization. I looked at their faces, truly looked at them. They weren't angry, not anymore. They were exposed. And for the first time, I felt truly free of them. I pushed my chair back, the soft scrape against the floor the only sound in the room. I stood up, smoothing the front of my dress. I didn't say goodbye. There were no goodbyes to be said. I simply turned and walked out of the dining room, my head held high, leaving them in their stunned silence. The next morning, my phone was a flurry of activity. The family group chat, usually buzzing with trivial updates and passive-aggressive memes, was completely silent. No one had posted since the dinner. I scrolled through the unread messages, a faint smile on my lips. Then, with a decisive tap, I removed myself from the chat permanently. The silence was louder than any scream. The morning after the dinner, the Parisian light filtered through the tall windows of Suite 419, painting stripes across the polished floor. I lay in the enormous marble tub, the water still warm, a tray balanced precariously on the edge. Croissants, flaky and buttery, sat next to a steaming cup of espresso. The Eiffel Tower, still visible from my bathroom window, seemed to shimmer in the distance. I closed my eyes, a deep, cleansing breath filling my lungs. There was no anger left, no simmering resentment, just a profound, almost overwhelming sense of peace. It wasn't the triumphant roar of victory, but the quiet hum of dignity reclaimed. For so long, my worth had been tied to their approval, their acceptance, their need for me. I had been the dependable one, the generous one, the one who always understood. But in their eyes, that had simply translated to the one we can take for granted. Now the strings were cut. The silence from their end was no longer a wound. It was a vast open space where I could finally breathe. I thought of Brock, the bartender. His words, "Power's not payback, it's being unbothered," had resonated deeply. He had seen past the facade, recognised the quiet pain beneath. I picked up my phone, still damp from the steam, and navigated to the hotel's website. I found the review section and began to type. 5 stars unequivocally. My stay at the Grand Parisian has been nothing short of transformative. The presidential suite, 419, offered unparalleled comfort and breathtaking views. Every staff member was exceptional, but I must specifically commend the spa team for their serene atmosphere and the outstanding service at the main bar. Brock, the bartender, was particularly insightful and made my evenings truly enjoyable. His professionalism and genuine kindness are a credit to your establishment. This hotel truly understands the meaning of luxury and peace. Highly recommend for anyone seeking an uninterrupted, truly restorative experience. I submitted it anonymously, a small gesture of appreciation for the genuine human connection I'd found amidst my calculated act. It wasn't about him, not really, but about the feeling he'd helped me access. After a long, luxurious shower, I dressed in a simple, comfortable outfit. I wasn't going anywhere fancy. I just wanted to feel the city, unburdened. Before I left my suite, I took one last look at the view. The infinity pool on the rooftop was glistening under the morning sun. An idea sparked. I walked up to the rooftop, the air crisp and cool. The pool was almost empty. I slipped into the water, the cool embrace a stark contrast to the warmth of the tub. I swam a few laps, feeling my muscles stretch, the tension draining away with each stroke. Then I positioned myself at the edge of the infinity pool, the Eiffel Tower perfectly framed behind me. I set my phone on a timer, angled it just right, and took a single photo. My silhouette, strong and serene, against the iconic Parisian backdrop. I posted it to my social media, something I rarely did. No long rambling caption, no hashtags about family or vacation, just 3 simple words: solo season, uninterrupted. I didn't check for likes or comments. I didn't care. This wasn't for them. This was for me. As I put my phone back in my bag, it lit up. A text from Kingsley, then another from Sophia. I didn't open them. I didn't need to. I knew what they would say. Apologies, attempts to smooth things over, invitations to talk, to fix things. But there was nothing to fix. I wasn't broken. I left the hotel a few hours later, my luggage lighter than when I arrived, not because I'd bought less, but because I'd shed a lifetime of emotional baggage. The concierge, the same charming young man, bid me a warm farewell. "We hope to see you again soon, Mademoiselle Warren." "You will," I promised, a genuine smile on my face. As the taxi pulled away from the Grand Parisian, I looked back at the grand facade. I still heard my laugh at that pool, a clear, uninhibited sound. And how no one dared to interrupt it.
The email arrived at 3:17 p.m. on a Tuesday, exactly 3 weeks before my high school graduation. It wasn't from a college admissions office or a scholarship committee. It was from the bursar's office at State University, and the subject line was a polite, professional punch to the gut. Outstanding balance on student account. My name is Lisa. At 18, I thought I had my life mapped out. I was a straight-A student, had a scholarship for half my tuition, and my parents had always promised the other half was tucked away, safe in a college fund. A fund they'd started the day I was born, or so they said. My entire childhood, the college fund was the sacred cow. "For your future, Lisa," Mum would coo, stroking my hair. "A nest egg for your dreams?" It wasn't just money. It was a promise, a symbol of their investment in me, their only child. Before I continue, comment your country or city. I love seeing where my stories land. I walked into the living room where my mum, Victoria, was flipping through a magazine, and Dorian, my stepfather, was watching some golf tournament, feet up on the ottoman. They looked like the picture of suburban bliss, all manicured lawns and designer clothes. My mum, Victoria, was the kind of woman who aged like fine wine if you poured enough money into her. At 58, she clung to 40 with a death grip of injectables and expensive highlights. Dorian, her husband, my stepfather, was a few years older, probably 62. Slick, charming, the kind of guy who could sell ice to an Eskimo, or, apparently, convince my mum to drain my college fund. "Mum," I started, holding up my phone, my voice tight. "What is this? State U says my tuition hasn't been paid." "There's an outstanding balance." Victoria barely looked up, her perfectly manicured hand waving dismissively. "Oh, that. We'll get to it, honey. Don't worry your pretty little head." "No, Mom," I pressed, stepping closer. "It's due next week. They're threatening to rescind my enrollment." Dorian finally muted the TV. He looked at me, not with concern, but with that, "I'm about to explain something complicated to a child" expression that always made my blood boil. "Lisa, we had to make some adjustments." "Adjustments? What adjustments? Where's the college fund?" The words felt foreign in my mouth. My voice was rising, despite my best efforts to keep it even. Victoria sighed, finally putting down her magazine, her perfectly made-up face creased with what looked like annoyance, not regret. "Look, sweetie, things change. Dorian needed a win. After his divorce, you know. It was a rough patch. And honestly," she paused, looking at me with a condescending pity, "you're a smart girl. You're impulsive. We just felt you wouldn't truly appreciate the money right now. You'd probably blow it on something silly." My stomach dropped. "Blow it on something silly," I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. Impulsive? I was the kid who color-coded her homework, saved every birthday dollar, and planned her college major since middle school. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Just then, a notification pinged on my mum's iPad, which was lying on the coffee table. It was a photo from her friend's Instagram, tagged with Victoria and Dorian. A brand new, gleaming white custom jet ski parked on a trailer, with my mum and Dorian grinning next to it, sun-kissed and smug. The caption read, "Dorian's new toy, so happy for them. Da midlife win, da treat yourself, la 40K fun." $40,000. My college tuition, probably a significant chunk of it, floating on some lake, fueling Dorian's win. My vision blurred. It wasn't just the money, it was the casual cruelty of it, the dismissal. Like my future was just a piggy bank they could smash when Dorian needed a new toy. Like I was a problem, not a daughter. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just looked at them, at the photo, then back at their placid, self-satisfied faces. The betrayal was a physical blow, a cold, hard knot in my chest. I just nodded slowly. "Okay," I said. Just, okay. I turned around and walked out of the living room, out of the house, and kept walking until my legs ached. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I wasn't coming back to that version of my life. They probably thought I was just a dramatic teenager, stomping off to cool down. They had no idea. They had no idea that okay was the quietest, most dangerous word I knew. They had no idea that every step I took away from that house was a step towards something they would never see coming. That night, I opened a new checking account online. 0 balance. Then I sat down at my beat-up laptop, created a new folder on my desktop, and labelled it Justice Plan. Inside, I started a new document. The first line read, Victoria and Dorian Mann, debt owed. The Justice Plan folder sat on my desktop, a silent promise. In the immediate aftermath of the jet ski revelation, I didn't have the luxury of wallowing. My 18th birthday passed without a word from Victoria or Dorian. I was on my own, and State U wasn't waiting. I enrolled in community college, securing enough scholarships and grants to cover tuition and books. My days became a blur of classes, shifts at a coffee shop, and nights spent stocking shelves at a grocery store. Weekends, I picked up freelance data entry. I was 18, then 19, then 20, living in a cramped shared apartment with 2 other students, surviving on instant noodles and pure spite. My impulsiveness, as Victoria so kindly put it, was apparently a myth. I was a machine, fueled by a quiet, simmering rage. I cut contact with my mum and Dorian completely. They didn't try very hard to reach out. A few half-hearted texts from Victoria initially, then silence. But I saw them. Not in person, not ever. But their lives played out in sickeningly glossy squares on social media. Victoria, forever tanned and airbrushed, posing on tropical beaches, at fancy restaurants, in front of new cars. Dorian always by her side, looking like the benevolent patriarch, his arm around her, his smile too wide. They were living the life my college fund had bought them, flaunting it for the world to see. Every post was a fresh stab, a reminder of what they'd stolen, and a fresh deposit into my mental, debt-owed ledger. Even as I worked and studied, the Justice Plan folder grew. I spent late nights devouring online courses in digital bookkeeping and forensic accounting. It wasn't just about getting my money back. It was about understanding how they did it, how people like them operated. I learned about public records, corporate filings, the digital breadcrumbs people leave behind. My focus wasn't just on their current spending. I started digging into the past. I wanted to see the foundations of their greed, old bank statements, property records, anything I could legally access or piece together from public databases. It was tedious, frustrating work, often hitting dead ends, but I was patient. I had years. It was during one of my rare breaks from work, curled up on the threadbare couch in our living room, that my cousin Sasha called. Sasha Quinn, my dad's niece, was a few years older than me, maybe 31 at the time, and always had a quiet strength about her. She was in law school, buried in textbooks like I was. We hadn't talked much since I'd moved out, mostly due to my self-imposed isolation. "Hey, stranger," she said, her voice warm. "How are you really doing?" I mumbled something about being busy, about school. She listened patiently. Then she dropped the bombshell, so casually it almost didn't register. "You know, Aunt Victoria was always a piece of work," Sasha began, her voice low. "My mum, your Aunt Carol, was talking the other day. Apparently, Victoria was seeing someone else, Royal Turner, even before she filed for divorce from your dad, while he was sick." My breath hitched. My dad. He'd been sick for a long time before he died. A slow, brutal illness that had taken everything from him, piece by painful piece. I'd been too young to fully grasp the nuances, just old enough to feel the chilling silence that had fallen over our house in his final months. Victoria had always painted herself as the grieving, devoted wife. This was a new layer of rot. "And," Sasha continued, her voice dropping even lower, "Aunt Carol also mentioned something about Victoria cashing out a big chunk of your dad's life insurance policy, right after he passed. Not all of it, but a significant portion. Like, within days." The phone felt heavy in my hand. Cheating? While he was dying? And then immediately cashing out his life insurance? It wasn't just about the college fund anymore. This was a betrayal on an entirely different scale. My father, who had loved me fiercely, who had worked tirelessly to provide for us, was being desecrated, even in death. After we hung up, I couldn't sleep. The image of Victoria, the grieving widow, flashed against the new information. It clicked into place with a sickening thud. All those years, all those stories about how hard it was for her after Dad died, how she'd sacrificed everything. Lies, all of it. I pulled up my justice plan folder, my fingers flying over the keyboard. I started digging deeper, specifically into the period around my father's death. Public probate records, death certificates, anything that might shed light on his estate. Hours bled into days, days into weeks. And then, late one night, buried deep in a digitized archive of old county records, I found it. A blurry scan of a joint withdrawal slip. The date was unmistakable. It was the same day as my father's funeral. The amount was significant. And the signatures, though smudged, looked like Victoria's, and another I couldn't quite make out. But I had a chilling suspicion. The blurry scan of the withdrawal slip became my obsession. The signature next to Victoria's was too smudged to confirm, but Sasha's revelation about Royal Turner, the ex-boyfriend, gnawed at me. I was 21 now, 3 years after the jet ski, and my life was a relentless grind. Community college was done. I'd transferred to State U on a full ride, and my 3 jobs were still paying the bills for my shared apartment. But the justice plan was evolving. My self-taught skills in digital bookkeeping and forensic accounting were starting to pay off. I'd moved beyond data entry, finding small freelance gigs, helping local businesses reconcile their books or track down discrepancies. It was tedious, but it was real-world experience, and it gave me a legitimate reason to dive deep into financial records. I was building a reputation, slowly, quietly, as someone who could find what others couldn't. This growing skill set became my weapon. I wasn't just tracking Victoria and Dorian's social media anymore. I was carefully monitoring their financial fingerprints through public records, property tax assessments, business registrations, county permits, anything that was publicly accessible. It was like piecing together a vast, ugly puzzle. I discovered Dorian had registered a few shell companies, nothing overtly illegal on the surface, but they seemed to pop up and disappear with alarming frequency. They were often listed at residential addresses or PO boxes, and their stated business activities were vague, ranging from consulting to asset management. The more I dug, the more a pattern emerged. These shell companies often had large, round number write-offs for business expenses that seemed disproportionate to their stated income. It smelled like minor tax evasion, or at least highly aggressive, questionable accounting. I started documenting everything meticulously. Screenshots, public record links, dates, amounts, every suspicious transaction, every vague business registration went into a subfolder labelled Dorian's Delusions. I was 22 when the message popped up on my LinkedIn. It was from Reese Turner, Dorian's adult daughter from his previous marriage. I knew of her, of course. She was a few years older than me, late 20s, and from what I gathered from Victoria's social media, she usually defended her father fiercely. She'd even posted a few snarky comments about Victoria's trophy wife status back when I was younger, before Victoria had apparently charmed her into line. Her message was short, cryptic, and sent a jolt through me. He did it to my college fund too. My heart pounded. I stared at the words, rereading them. It wasn't just me. Dorian was a predator, a pattern. He hadn't just encouraged Victoria. He was a serial offender. This wasn't just about my mother's betrayal. It was about Dorian's systemic manipulation. It gave my justice plan a new, sharper edge. It wasn't just personal revenge anymore. It was about exposing a con artist. I messaged Reese back immediately. We exchanged numbers, and a few days later, we met at a neutral coffee shop, far from any place Victoria or Dorian might frequent. Reese was wary at first, her eyes darting around, but there was a deep-seated anger simmering beneath her polite facade. She told me her story, almost identical to mine. Her mother, Dorian's first wife, had set up a trust for Reese's college. When it came time to apply, the trust was empty. Dorian had convinced her mother to invest it in one of his sure-thing business ventures, which, predictably, evaporated. Reese had been forced to take out loans, work multiple jobs just like me. She'd always suspected Dorian, but her mother, still under his spell, had dismissed her concerns. I thought I was crazy, Reese admitted, stirring her coffee, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. He's so good at making you feel like you're the problem, like you're ungrateful. I know the feeling, I said, a bitter smile touching my lips. He told my mum I was too impulsive to appreciate the money. And then they bought a jet ski. Reese snorted, a humorless laugh. Figures. He bought my mum a ridiculously expensive, completely useless antique clock right after he blew through my fund. Said it was an investment in our family's heritage. We talked for hours, sharing stories, piecing together Dorian's modus operandi. Reese had some documents too, old bank statements, letters from her mother's lawyer about the failed trust. It wasn't enough for a full case, but it was more evidence, more pieces for my puzzle. I have a cousin, I told Reese, Sasha. She's a lawyer now. She might be able to help us figure out what to do with all this. I called Sasha that night. She was now a practicing attorney, specializing in civil litigation. I laid out everything: the college fund, the jet ski, the life insurance withdrawal, Dorian's shell companies, and now Reese's identical story. Sasha listened, her questions sharp and precise. "This is a lot, Lisa," she said finally, her voice serious. "But it's also a pattern. And patterns are good for cases." "Can we do anything?" I asked, my voice laced with a desperate hope I hadn't realized I still had. "We can start with a quiet court inquiry," Sasha said, her voice firm. "Under my name, to keep you out of it for now, just to get access to more official records, to see what else Dorian's been up to. It's a fishing expedition, but it's a legal one." My heart leapt. This was it. The first official step. The legal wheels were finally in motion. "Do it," I told her. "Whatever it takes." Sasha's quiet court inquiry was a slow burn, but it was progress. While she navigated the legal system, I focused on my growing freelance finance business. I was 23 now, still grinding, but my client list was expanding, and I was finally making enough to consider moving out of the shared apartment. The justice plan was no longer just a folder. It was a parallel life, meticulously built alongside my professional one. The thought of reaching out to my grandmother, Emerson, had been nagging at me for months. Victoria's mother, Emerson, was 81 now, and I hadn't seen her in over a decade. Victoria had always kept us estranged, citing Emerson's difficult nature. But after everything I'd uncovered, I had a feeling Emerson's difficulty might just be a polite way of saying she saw through Victoria's facade. I called her on a whim, bracing myself for a cold reception. Instead, her voice was surprisingly warm, tinged with a weariness that spoke of years. "Lisa, is that really you, darling?" A week later, I was on a bus heading to the small town where Emerson lived, a few hours outside the city. Her house was old, filled with the scent of lavender and dust, and felt like stepping back in time. Emerson herself was frail but sharp, her eyes a startling blue, much like my father's had been. We sat in her sun-drenched living room, sipping weak tea, and I started to tell her everything. The college fund, the jet ski, Sasha's revelation about Victoria and Royal Turner, the life insurance withdrawal, Reese's story about Dorian. I watched her face as I spoke, expecting shock, maybe anger. Instead, there was a quiet sadness, a knowing resignation. "Victoria was always like this, Lisa," Emerson said, her voice raspy, image-obsessed, manipulative. She always wanted what she thought she deserved, no matter who she had to step on to get it. She paused, her gaze distant. "When your grandfather died, he left me a small inheritance, enough to live comfortably, nothing lavish. Victoria, she convinced me to invest a good portion of it with a financial advisor she knew. Said it would grow, secure my future. It disappeared. Just like that. The advisor was a friend of hers, and he vanished too. I never saw a dime." My jaw tightened. Another pattern. My grandmother too. This wasn't just about my college fund. This was a generational sickness, passed down through Victoria, Emerson, my father, Reese, and me. "And Lisa," Emerson continued, her voice dropping, "I remember something else. When you were a toddler, your mother was in a tight spot financially. She was always trying to keep up appearances. I recall her talking about taking out a small loan. She mentioned using your name, something about it being easier to get approved with a child's name on it, for some kind of educational savings plan. I thought it was strange even then, but she brushed it off. A loan in my name? As a toddler? The thought was sickening. It explained some of the strange, unidentifiable entries I'd found in some of the older public financial records I'd been sifting through, records that had my name attached to them from when I was too young to even write it. It was a small amount, maybe a few thousand, long since paid off, but the audacity of it, to use her own child's identity for a loan. It was a small betrayal, but it spoke volumes about her character, her willingness to exploit anyone, even her own baby, for her own ends. I felt a wave of nausea, then a profound weariness. It wasn't just my life. It was a tapestry of deceit woven through generations. My grandmother, my father, me. All victims of Victoria's endless pursuit of status and her husband's greed. The weight of it all pressed down on me, and for the first time in years, I felt the hot sting of tears. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was heartbroken. Heartbroken for the little girl who believed in a college fund, for the father who died betrayed, for the grandmother whose trust was stolen. I broke down, sobbing silently, the years of suppressed pain finally bubbling to the surface. Emerson didn't try to comfort me with platitudes. She just held my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "It's a lot to carry, child, but now you know, and knowing is power." When my tears finally subsided, a strange clarity settled over me. The pain was still there, but it was no longer a raw wound. It was a roadmap. Every betrayal, every lie was now a piece of evidence, a coordinate on my path. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was understanding. As I was getting ready to leave, Emerson went into a back room and returned with a dusty, old wooden box. "This was your father's," she said, her voice soft. "He asked me to hold on to it for you. Just in case," he said. "After he died, Victoria made such a fuss about everything, I just tucked it away. Never thought much of it. She handed me the box. It was heavy, made of dark, polished wood. Inside, nestled amongst old photographs and a few faded letters, was a thick envelope. My name was scrawled on it in my father's familiar handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a will, not the one Victoria had presented to the probate court. This one was dated years before his death, but after his diagnosis. It was notarized, witnessed, and it named me, Lisa Rivera, as the sole beneficiary of his entire estate. Every penny. It was never filed. The will, my father's will, naming me sole beneficiary, tucked away in a dusty box for over a decade. It was the missing piece, the ultimate betrayal. Victoria hadn't just stolen my college fund, she'd stolen my entire inheritance. The quiet court inquiry Sasha had initiated suddenly felt like a gentle tap when what was needed was a sledgehammer. I was 24 now, almost 25, and my freelance finance business was thriving. I'd moved into my own small apartment, a quiet victory. The justice plan had consumed years of my life, but it was finally reaching its crescendo. The invitation arrived in the mail, thick cardstock, embossed with gold lettering. Victoria and Dorian's 10-year anniversary party. A lavish affair at a coastal resort, a place synonymous with old money and expensive tastes. My stomach twisted. 10 years of their gilded life, built on lies and stolen futures. I looked at the date. 2 months away. Plenty of time. I RSVP'd, yes. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about exposing the truth, about ripping away the meticulously crafted facade Victoria and Dorian had built. The party wasn't just an anniversary, it was going to be my reckoning. I called Sasha immediately. She was now a senior associate at a reputable law firm, her expertise in civil litigation growing. Sasha, I said, my voice steady, I need you to notarize everything, every single piece of evidence we have. And I mean everything. Over the next few weeks, Sasha and I worked tirelessly. We compiled a dossier that would make a seasoned prosecutor blush. The evidence of the college fund diversion, meticulously tracked through old bank statements and school records. Reese's testimony, backed by her own documents, about Dorian draining her college trust. The blurry withdrawal slip from the day of my father's funeral, which, with Sasha's legal access, we were able to cross-reference with bank records. It showed a significant withdrawal from my father's joint account, signed by Victoria and an unidentified second party. We couldn't definitively prove it was Royal Turner yet, but the timing was damning. Then there was the loan Victoria had taken out in my name as a toddler. Sasha confirmed it. A small, unsecured personal loan taken out when I was 2 years old under the guise of an educational savings account. It had been paid off years ago, but the paper trail was there, a chilling testament to Victoria's willingness to exploit anyone, even her own child. And then, the crown jewel, my father's unfiled will. Sasha was stunned. This changes everything, Lisa. We can submit this to probate. It could challenge the entire distribution of his estate. We made notarized copies of everything. The will, the financial statements, the property records, the loan documents, Reese's signed affidavit. Sasha also helped me draft legal documents for the informal annulment of the inheritance rights Victoria had claimed through the previously filed will, based on the discovery of the true will and the evidence of fraud. It was a complex legal maneuver, but Sasha assured me it was sound. My forensic accounting skills, honed over years, were now at their peak. I went back to Dorian's shell companies. The quiet court inquiry Sasha had initiated had given us access to more corporate filings, more obscure databases. And that's when I found it. One of Dorian's shell companies, a particularly vague one called Man Solutions LLC, had a series of transactions with another company that raised red flags. I cross-referenced the names, the addresses, the dates. It led me down a rabbit hole of online forums and news articles. Man Solutions LLC was associated with a network of known tax scammers, people who offered creative accounting solutions to wealthy clients, often involving fake business write-offs and offshore accounts. The amounts involved were substantial, far beyond minor tax evasion. This was serious, potentially criminal fraud. I found evidence of large sums being funneled through Man Solutions LLC and then disappearing into a complex web of other shell companies, some with addresses in known tax havens. It wasn't just Dorian taking a few extra write-offs. He was part of a larger, organised scheme. This was big. This was a criminal offence, not just a civil one. I included all the evidence of this shell company and its connections in the package. It added a whole new layer of legal vulnerability for Dorian, making his previous minor tax evasion look like child's play. A week before the party, the final package was ready. A thick, heavy binder, filled with years of my life, years of their deceit, all notarized, all legally sound. I went to the post office, bought a sturdy, sealed envelope, and addressed it to myself at my apartment. I labelled it clearly, "Final weapon, do not open unless..." It was a contingency, a backup plan. If anything went wrong at the party, if they tried to deny, to deflect, to destroy the evidence, this sealed envelope, mailed to myself, would serve as irrefutable proof of the date and content of the documents. It was my insurance policy, my final layer of protection. The game was on. The coastal resort was everything Victoria and Dorian embodied: opulent, a little gaudy, and completely superficial. Palm trees swayed under a perfect sunset, string lights twinkled, and the air hummed with the polite chatter of their carefully curated social circle. I was 25 now, dressed in a simple, elegant black dress, a stark contrast to the glittering gowns and expensive suits that filled the ballroom. I walked in, head held high, a small, wrapped gift box clutched in my hand. I hadn't seen Victoria or Dorian in 7 years, not since the jet ski. They were holding court near the grand staircase, Dorian's arm around Victoria's waist, both of them beaming, radiating the kind of self-satisfaction that only comes from deep delusion. Victoria, at 58, looked like a woman who had never known a day of worry, thanks to her husband's wins. Dorian, 62, was all charm and practiced smiles. They spotted me across the room. Victoria's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, replaced by a look of surprised annoyance, then a forced, saccharine sweetness. "Lisa, darling, you came." She swept towards me, arms outstretched, as if we hadn't spent 7 years in a Cold War. I allowed her a brief, air-kissed cheek. "Happy anniversary, Mum," I said, my voice flat, devoid of warmth. Dorian clapped me on the shoulder, his smile too wide, too fake. "Lisa, look at you, all grown up. So glad you could make it." He probably thought this was a sign I'd finally come to my senses, ready to rejoin their perfect little family tableau. The evening dragged on, a parade of forced smiles and empty compliments. I mingled, nodding politely, sipping sparkling cider, observing them. Victoria gave a smug speech about love, joy, and family legacies, her voice dripping with false sentiment. Dorian chimed in, talking about their journey together, conveniently omitting the part where that journey was paved with other people's stolen money. My stomach churned, but I kept my expression neutral, a mask of polite detachment. Then came the moment. Dessert was being served, and Victoria and Dorian were moving around, accepting congratulations. I intercepted them near the champagne fountain. "Mom, Dorian," I said, holding out the small, wrapped box. "I brought you a gift." Victoria took it, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Oh, Lisa, you shouldn't have. What is it?" She started to tear at the wrapping paper, a greedy glint in her eye. Dorian leaned in, a paternal smile on his face. The paper came off, revealing a plain, white jewellery box. Victoria opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was a single, crisp, white card. No jewellery, just the card. She picked it up, her brow furrowing slightly. She read the single sentence printed on it aloud, her her voice clear in the suddenly quieter space around us. "Your gift is in escrow. It's called financial fraud." The words hung in the air, a poisoned dart. Victoria's face, usually so composed, crumpled. Her eyes, wide with confusion, then dawning horror, darted from the card to me. She looked like she'd been slapped. A few nearby guests, drawn by the sudden silence, turned to look. Dorian, ever the quick thinker, tried to laugh it off. "Lisa, what is this? Some kind of joke?" He reached for the box. "No joke, Dorian," I said, my voice calm, clear, and cutting through the polite hum of the party. "It's the truth." He snatched the box from Victoria, his eyes narrowing as he saw the stack of documents beneath the card. Not just a card, it was the binder. The one I'd mailed to myself, but this was the original, carried carefully in my clutch. I'd switched them out just before leaving my apartment. He pulled out the top document. It was a notarized copy of my father's will, naming me sole beneficiary. His eyes scanned it, then flicked to Victoria, then back to me, a flicker of fear in their depths. He pulled out another, then another. The bank statements, the evidence of his shell companies, the transactions with the tax scammers, Reese's affidavit, the loan in my name. The colour drained from his face. His hands started to tremble, the papers rustling. Victoria, seeing his reaction, grabbed a handful of documents from him. Her eyes widened as she read the headings. Probate challenge, estate of Robert Rivera. Evidence of financial misrepresentation, Man Solutions LLC. Affidavit of Reese Turner. Her perfectly made-up face went pale, then blotchy with rage and fear. "What is this, Lisa?" she hissed, her voice a low, furious whisper. "What have you done?" "I've given you your anniversary gift," I replied, my voice still calm, a chilling contrast to their unravelling. "The truth, and the consequences." Dorian, his eyes darting around the room, seemed to realise the gravity of the situation faster than Victoria. He saw the guests staring, the whispers starting. He saw his carefully constructed empire crumbling. He shoved the documents back into the box, his face a mask of panic. "This is ridiculous," he blustered, trying to regain control. "A sick joke. We're leaving." He grabbed Victoria's arm, pulling her towards the nearest exit, a side door leading to the resort parking lot. But as he took a frantic step, a figure moved to block his path. It was Sasha, calm and poised, dressed in a sharp pantsuit, and beside her, two men in plain clothes, their posture subtly authoritative. They weren't guests. They were off-duty police officers, hired by Sasha to be present, just in case. "Mr. Mann," Sasha said, her voice clear and professional, "I wouldn't advise that. We have a few questions for you." Dorian froze, his face a mask of pure terror. The two men Sasha had brought, though dressed casually, moved with an undeniable authority. One of them, a burly man with kind eyes, stepped forward. "Mr. Mann, we'd appreciate it if you came with us." "Just for a conversation." Victoria let out a strangled gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. The party, which moments ago had been a symphony of polite chatter, was now a tableau of frozen faces and gaping mouths. Whispers erupted, louder this time, as guests realised something far more serious than a family spat was unfolding. Dorian, ever the manipulator, tried one last time. "This is a misunderstanding. My stepdaughter is clearly unwell." "This is harassment." "We have reason to believe otherwise, sir," the burly officer said, his voice calm but firm. He gestured towards the exit. Dorian, seeing the game was up, sagged. He shot me a look of pure hatred, a look that promised retribution. But it was hollow. He knew he was caught. Within minutes he was being escorted out, the white gift box clutched in the officer's hand. Victoria stood there, abandoned, exposed. Her perfectly coiffed hair seemed to droop. Her designer dress suddenly looked like a costume. Her social mask had shattered, revealing the raw, ugly fear beneath. She was still holding some of the documents I'd given her, her hands trembling so violently the papers rustled like dead leaves. Her eyes darted around the room, meeting the horrified, curious stares of her guests. Her carefully constructed world was collapsing around her. Within 5 days, the news hit. Dorian Mann had been arrested for financial misrepresentation and fraud. The evidence I'd gathered, particularly regarding Mann Solutions LLC and its ties to known tax scammers, was damning. Sasha had wasted no time submitting the full package to the authorities. The shell company scheme, the fraudulent write-offs, the funneling of funds. It was all there, meticulously documented. Victoria spiraled. Her accounts were frozen almost immediately as part of the ongoing investigation. The lavish lifestyle, the designer clothes, the coastal resort parties, it all ground to a halt. The old will I'd submitted to probate, my father's true will naming me sole beneficiary, reopened past estate conditions. Suddenly, Victoria's entire financial history was visible to creditors and under intense scrutiny. The life insurance payout, the investments she'd made, the loan in my name as a toddler, it was all being picked apart. The family started turning on her. Her friends at the party, the ones who had been so quick to toast her love and legacy, suddenly found reasons to be elsewhere. I heard through Sasha that calls from creditors were relentless, and her social calendar was suddenly empty. The woman who had prioritized appearances above all else was now publicly disgraced. The high point came during the initial court proceedings for Dorian. Reese Turner, Dorian's daughter, testified. She recounted how her college fund had been stolen, how her father had manipulated her mother, how he had gaslit her into believing she was ungrateful. Her testimony was calm, articulate, and devastating. She looked at Dorian, sitting across the courtroom with a quiet, steely resolve that mirrored my own. And then, my grandmother, Emerson, showed up. Frail but determined, she walked into the courtroom, supported by Sasha, and publicly supported me. She testified about Victoria siphoning her inheritance, about the loan taken out in my name. Her voice, though soft, carried the weight of 81 years of quiet observation. It was a powerful moment, a public repudiation of Victoria's lies from the very woman who had given birth to her. The biggest twist, however, came a few weeks later, when Sasha called me, her voice buzzing with a mix of triumph and disbelief. "Lisa, you're not going to believe this. We found something else." When we started digging into Victoria's property records, because of the probate challenge, she remortgaged your childhood home, not just once but twice, under a fake trust, a shell entity that Dorian helped her set up. It was designed to shield the assets, but it's completely illegal. My childhood home, the house where I'd grown up, where my father had lived and died, remortgaged under a fake trust. It was another layer of betrayal, another piece of my history they had tried to steal and exploit. But now, because of the legal actions we'd taken, because of the unravelling of their entire fraudulent enterprise, I could legally challenge and unwind it. The house, my father's house, was still tied up in their web of deceit, but now I had the power to reclaim it. A few months later, after Dorian had been formally charged and Victoria was facing a barrage of civil lawsuits, I found myself sitting in Victoria's old living room. The house was quiet, almost empty, as her assets were being inventoried for the legal proceedings. The furniture was still there, but it felt hollow, stripped of its former pretense. The jet ski was long gone, seized as part of Dorian's assets. My phone buzzed. A single text message from Victoria. "Please, I didn't know it would end this way. Please, I didn't know it would end this way." I stared at the text message on my phone, sitting in the quiet, echoing living room of the house that was once my home, now just a shell awaiting legal dissection. Victoria's plea was pathetic, desperate, and utterly devoid of self-awareness. She didn't know. She didn't know that stealing, lying, and exploiting people would lead to consequences. She didn't know that building a life on fraud would eventually crumble. I typed a single, cold reply. I did. Then I blocked her number. There was nothing left to say. No apology would ever bridge the chasm she had created. No remorse could erase the years of quiet suffering and relentless work. Her ignorance was a choice, a luxury she could no longer afford. The next year and a half was a whirlwind of legal proceedings, rebuilding, and quiet triumph. Dorian Mann, the charismatic con artist, was convicted of multiple counts of financial fraud and misrepresentation. The evidence I'd meticulously compiled, combined with Reese's testimony and Sasha's legal prowess, was irrefutable. He received a significant prison sentence, disappearing from the public eye as swiftly as he had charmed his way into it. His wins had finally caught up to him. Victoria, stripped of Dorian's financial machinations and facing the full force of the law, fared no better. The probate court, armed with my father's true will, ruled in my favour. The life insurance payout she had taken, the inheritance she had siphoned from Emerson, the loan she'd taken in my name as a toddler, it all came to light. Her assets, including the remortgaged childhood home, were seized to satisfy creditors and legal judgments. She lost everything: the house, the cars, the jewellery, the carefully cultivated social standing. The woman who had lived for appearances was left with nothing but the ugly truth of her own making. The last I heard, she was living in a small, rented apartment, a ghost of her former self, utterly alone. As for me, the scaffolding I had built for my truth held firm. The legal process of unwinding the fraudulent remortgage on my childhood home was complex, but ultimately successful. The house was sold, and the proceeds, after all legal fees and outstanding debts were settled, were finally mine. It wasn't about living in that house again. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully ours, about erasing their stain from my family's history. My father's will, finally submitted to probate, ensured I received my rightful inheritance. It was a substantial amount, enough to provide a solid foundation for my future, the future that had been stolen from me at 18. It wasn't just money, it was validation. It was my father's last act of love, finally realised. I graduated with my business master's degree, the culmination of years of grinding, of late nights and early mornings. My consulting business, which had started as a quiet side hustle, expanded rapidly. The skills I'd honed in my justice plan, forensic accounting, meticulous documentation, strategic planning, were invaluable. I was no longer just a survivor. I was a force. Reese, Dorian's daughter, became my chief accountant. She was brilliant, ethical, and understood the dark underbelly of finance better than anyone. We built a business founded on transparency and integrity, a direct antithesis to everything her father represented. Our shared history of betrayal forged an unbreakable bond, a silent understanding that transcended words. My relationship with Emerson blossomed. She became a true spiritual anchor, a source of wisdom and quiet strength. We spent weekends together, talking for hours, piecing together family history, healing old wounds. She saw the justice, and it brought her a peace she hadn't known in decades. Sasha, my steadfast cousin, remained a close friend and trusted legal advisor, always there, always ready to fight. Revenge didn't fix everything. It didn't erase the pain of betrayal or the years of struggle. It didn't magically bring my father back or mend the broken pieces of my childhood. But it gave me back my agency. It allowed me to reclaim my narrative, to stand tall in my truth, and to ensure that their selfish choices had karmic consequences. Justice, I learned, doesn't always look like an apology. It sometimes just sounds like silence on the other end of a disconnected line. And sometimes it feels like the quiet satisfaction of building something real and honest on the ashes of what was stolen.
The key scraped uselessly against the cold metal of the lock. I tried again, a little harder this time, but the tumblers wouldn't budge. My heart, which had been buzzing with anticipation for the last 5 hours of driving, started to sink. I'd driven all night, arriving a day early, just to set up the perfect surprise for my mom's 60th birthday tomorrow. My mom, Kennedy, deserved it. After everything. Before we move on, tell me where you're watching from. I love mapping my viewers. I pulled out my phone, a knot forming in my stomach. The house looked the same from the outside. The familiar porch swing, the slightly chipped paint on the trim. But something was off. The curtains in my old bedroom window were different, a heavy, dark fabric I didn't recognize. Just as I was about to call, the front door swung open. Not my mom, Zaylee. My cousin, Zaylee Lane, stood there, framed in the doorway, wearing a silk robe that looked far too expensive for a Tuesday afternoon. Her hair was still damp, slicked back from a shower, and she had that lazy, self-satisfied smirk playing on her lips. She was 27, 2 years younger than me, and looked like she hadn't lifted a finger in months. Her eyes widened, a performance I knew well. "Aurora, what are you doing here?" Her voice, usually a little too high-pitched, was smooth, almost bored. There wasn't an ounce of surprise in it, let alone warmth. No hug, no, "It's so good to see you." Just a question, like I was a delivery driver who'd shown up at the wrong address. "I was going to surprise Mom for her birthday," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "But the locks are changed." Zaylee shrugged, adjusting the lapels of her robe. "Oh, yeah. We had to do that. A new tenant moved into your old room." My breath hitched. My room? I stared at her, then past her, into the hallway where my life had unfolded for 24 years. "My childhood room, my sanctuary." "Yeah," she said, as if discussing the weather. "Mom rented it out, to help with expenses." She gestured vaguely. "A family friend, actually. The Miller's eldest, Sarah. She needed a place." My mind reeled. Expenses? "I'm Aurora Harris, I'm 29 years old, and for the past 5 years, ever since my dad died, I've been sending money home every single month. Thousands. Tens of thousands. Money I'd earned working my butt off in tech, sacrificing vacations, putting off my own dreams. All because Mom, Kennedy, told me they were struggling to keep the house after Dad passed. I'd been so focused on providing, on being the responsible one, that I hadn't been home in almost a year. "Rented it out?" I repeated, the words tasting like ash. "Without telling me?" Just then, my mom, Kennedy, appeared behind Zaylee. She was 59, about to turn 60, and looked tired. Her face was drawn, her eyes avoiding mine. She didn't rush forward, didn't offer a hug, didn't even manage a weak smile. Just stood there, fidgeting with the collar of her blouse. The distance between us felt like a chasm. "Aurora," she said, her voice flat. "You're early." "I know," I managed, my voice tight. "I wanted to surprise you." "Well, you certainly did," Zaylee chirped, a little too brightly. She glanced at her watch. "Look, we're about to have dinner. You can stay at the motel down the street. We're full up here." My mom didn't contradict her. She just nodded, her gaze fixed on the floor. I stood there, a suitcase in one hand, my birthday gift for my mom in the other, feeling like a stranger on my own doorstep. The air thickened with unspoken words, with the weight of years of subtle shifts in our family dynamic. I drove to the motel Zaylee suggested, checked in, and tried to process it all. My room, rented out. My mom, distant and cold. Zaylee, smug and in charge. Later that evening, I walked past the house. The lights were on, and I could hear laughter spilling from the open windows. They were having dinner, a birthday celebration, without me. I saw Zaylee through the dining room window, animated, holding court. My mom was laughing at something she said. Just as I turned to leave, Zaylee's voice, amplified by the open window, cut through the night. "And honestly, the bachelorette weekend in Cabo?" "Best idea ever! Thanks again, Aurora, for funding that. You're the best!" My blood ran cold. Funding? That? I hadn't sent money for a bachelorette party. I'd sent money for the mortgage, for utilities, for my mom's dental surgery. My hands clenched at my sides. The betrayal was a physical ache. I hadn't been invited to dinner, but my money was clearly at the table. The motel room was sterile. smelling faintly of disinfectant and stale coffee. I hadn't slept, just stared at the popcorn ceiling, replaying Zaylee's voice, her casual, "Thanks again, Aurora, for funding that." It was 6 a.m. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and grays. My stomach churned, not from hunger, but from a cold, hard knot of disbelief. For 5 years ever since Dad died, I'd been the one, the responsible one. The one who picked up the phone every month, listened to Mom's quiet worries about the mortgage, the rising utility bills, the unexpected repairs. My father, bless his soul, had been the anchor of our family. When he passed 5 years ago, suddenly, from a heart attack, it felt like the whole world tilted. Mom, Kennedy, was lost. She'd never handled the finances, never really had to worry about money. I was 24 then, fresh out of college, just starting my career in tech. I'd seen her struggling, truly struggling, and I'd stepped up. Every month, without fail, a chunk of my salary went directly into her account. I'd skipped vacations, driven my old beat-up car for years longer than I should have, eaten more ramen than I care to admit. Also, Mom wouldn't lose the house, so she wouldn't have to worry. I'd even put off my own plans for a down payment on a condo, telling myself it could wait. Family first. Always. I pushed myself out of bed and pulled on some clothes. I needed coffee, and I needed to get out of that room. At a small, independent coffee shop downtown, I nursed a lukewarm latte, my phone clutched in my hand. Zaylee's wedding. I hadn't been able to attend, citing work commitments, which was partially true. But mostly it was because I couldn't afford the flight and a gift after sending so much money home. I'd sent a generous check, of course, telling myself it was for their future. Now, a morbid curiosity gnawed at me. I typed Zaylee's name into the search bar, adding wedding. Dozens of photos, tagged by guests and professional photographers, flooded my screen. My breath caught. It wasn't just a wedding, it was a spectacle. A horse-drawn carriage, white and gleaming, pulling Zaylee and her husband, Dawson Gomez, 34, charming and, from what I'd heard, perpetually between jobs, through a manicured private garden, a champagne tower, shimmering under fairy lights. A custom-built photo booth with props, live string quartet, an open bar. The dress Zaylee wore looked like it cost more than my annual rent. Every detail screamed opulence. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through image after image of lavishness. This wasn't a wedding paid for by a struggling family. This was a wedding that cost a small fortune. My small fortune. The knot in my stomach tightened into a hard, cold ball. My phone vibrated. It was Ava. Ava Simmons, my best friend since kindergarten, now 30 and a sharp-as-nails corporate lawyer. She was the one person I could always count on. I hesitated. How do you tell your best friend that your own mother and cousin just rented out your childhood room, then thanked you for funding a bachelorette party with money you thought was keeping a roof over their heads? It felt humiliating, but the silence stretched, and Ava's persistence won out. Aurora, you there? You sound weird. I'm here, I said, my voice barely a whisper. You won't believe what happened. And then, the dam broke. I told her everything. About arriving, the changed locks, Zaylee's smirk, Mom's distant eyes, the rented room, the dinner I wasn't invited to, and finally, Zaylee's casual thanks for the Cabo bachelorette. I even told her about the wedding pictures I'd just seen. Ava listened, silent for a long moment, which was rare for her. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, steady. Okay, deep breath. This is a lot. It's more than a lot, Ava. It's a betrayal. My own family. My voice cracked. It's always been like this, hasn't it? Zaylee could do no wrong. A memory surfaced, sharp and bitter. I was 14. Zaylee was 12. I'd kept a journal, full of my teenage crushes and anxieties. She'd found it, read it. And then, during a family dinner, she'd stood up and read excerpts aloud, giggling, while the rest of the family, my mom, Uncle Philip, aunts, uncles, laughed along. I'd run to my room, mortified, tears streaming down my face. My mom had come in later, not to comfort me, but to say, "Zaylee didn't mean it, Aurora. She's just a child. You're too sensitive." No one had defended me then. No one ever did when it came to Zaylee. I'd buried that hurt, like so many others. "Yeah, I remember the journal incident," Ava said, her voice tight with suppressed anger. "And the time she borrowed your prom dress and ripped it. And the time she spread that rumor about you in high school." She paused. "Look, I get it. This hurts more because it's the same pattern, just on a much bigger scale." She took another breath. "But here's the thing, Aurora. You're not 14 anymore. You're 29. You're smart. You're independent. And you've got me." "What do I even do?" I asked, feeling utterly lost. "You don't get mad," Ava said, her voice firm, professional now. "You get proof." "Don't get mad. Get proof." Ava's words echoed in my head as I sat at the small, wobbly desk in my motel room. My laptop was open, the screen glaring back at me. It was still early, but the sun was fully up now, mocking my sleepless night. Proof. The idea felt cold, clinical, a stark contrast to the churning emotions inside me. But Ava was right. Emotion had never gotten me anywhere with my family, especially not with Zaylee. I started with my emails. For 5 years I'd been meticulous. Every month, a transfer. Sometimes more if Mom mentioned a specific need. I'd always followed up with an email, a quick check-in, sometimes asking about the specific use of the funds. Scrolling through years of correspondence was like watching a slow-motion car crash. There were emails from me, dated monthly, always ending with, "Hope this helps, love you." And Mom's replies, always brief, sometimes just a, "Got it, thanks." But then, there were the specific requests. Subject, mortgage payment? "Hi, Mom. Just sent over $1,800 for the mortgage. Let me know if it covers it all. Love, Aurora." Subject, utility bill. "Hey, Mom. Saw your text about the electric bill being high. Sent an extra $450. Hope it helps with that." And then, the one that made my blood run cold. Subject, dental surgery? "Mom, just transferred $5,000 for your dental surgery. Please let me know how it goes. Thinking of you." $5,000. For dental surgery. That was a big one. I remembered being so worried, calling her multiple times, but she'd always been vague, saying she was recovering fine and it was a success. Next, my bank transfer logs. I pulled up statements from the last 5 years, meticulously tracking every outgoing transfer to Kennedy's account. The numbers piled up. $1,800 here, $2,000 there, $450, $5,000. It wasn't just a few thousand. It was a significant portion of my income. I added it all up, my fingers flying across the calculator app on my phone. The total flashed on the screen. 31,450s. Over $31,000. My stomach clenched. I sent the whole messy bundle of emails and bank statements to Ava. She replied almost instantly. "Good. Now, I'm connecting you with a financial investigator I trust. His name is Ben. He'll help us build a timeline and trace where this money actually went. Don't talk to anyone else about this. Not yet." Ben was efficient, quiet, and asked precise questions. He helped me organize the data, cross-referencing my transfers with the dates of Zaylee's wedding expenses, which he found online through public records and social media posts. The timeline he created was damning. Large transfers from my account often coincided with significant wedding deposits or purchases. A few days later, still holed up in the motel, I ran into Mrs. Henderson, a sweet, elderly neighbor who used to bake me cookies when I was a kid. She was walking her poodle near the coffee shop. "Aurora, dear, What a surprise! Are you visiting your mother? She chirped, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Hi, Mrs. Henderson. Yes, just for a bit, I said, forcing a smile. Oh, that's lovely. Your mother's been doing so well, especially after Zaylee's wedding. Such a grand affair. And her teeth look wonderful, too. No more issues after that little procedure she had a while back. My heart hammered. Her teeth? I asked, trying to sound casual. Oh, I thought she had some major dental surgery. Mrs. Henderson chuckled. Oh, no, dear. Just a little cosmetic work, I think. Whitening and some veneers. She was so pleased with them. Said Zaylee insisted she get them done for the wedding photos. Said it was a gift from the family. A gift from the family. $5,000 for cosmetic work, not life-saving surgery. My $5,000. The casual revelation hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the deliberate deception, the calculated lies. I thanked Mrs. Henderson, my smile feeling brittle, and walked away, my mind racing. They hadn't just used my money. They'd lied about why they needed it. Later that day, a thought struck me. Zaylee, she loved to brag. She loved attention. I took a deep breath and dialed her number. It rang twice before she answered, her voice still annoyingly cheerful. Aurora, to what do I owe the pleasure? Hey, Zaylee, I said, trying to inject a casual, almost admiring tone into my voice. Listen, I was thinking about getting into event planning on the side. And honestly, your wedding? It was stunning. Seriously, top-notch. I was wondering, could you possibly send me your vendor list? I mean, you clearly dropped major coin, and I'd love to see who you worked with. For inspiration, you know? There was a beat of silence, then Zaylee's laugh, loud and triumphant. Oh, Aurora, you think so? Well, it was pretty epic. Everyone said so. Of course I can send you the list. I'll even include some of the quotes. It'll show you how to really throw a party. That would be amazing, Zaylee. Thanks so much. My voice was calm, but inside, a cold fire was starting to burn. No problem, cuz, she said, practically preening. I'll email it over. You'll be impressed. An hour later, my inbox pinged. Zaylee had sent a meticulously organized spreadsheet. It listed every vendor, the private garden venue, the caterer, the florist, the string quartet, the horse-drawn carriage company, the champagne supplier, the custom cake baker, the photo booth rental, the designer of her dress, and next to each, the amount paid. The total was staggering, far more than $31,000. But enough of my money had gone directly into those accounts, or freed up other funds to pay for them, that it was, as Ava would say, damning. I looked at the spreadsheet, then at the timeline Ben had created, then at my bank statements. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying precision. They hadn't just taken my money. They had used it to fund Zaylee's dream wedding, while telling me they were struggling to keep the family afloat. And Zaylee, in her eagerness to brag, had just handed me the final, irrefutable proof. The spreadsheet from Zaylee sat open on my laptop screen, a monument to their deception. My money, my sacrifices, all funneled into a lavish celebration for someone else. The cold fire that had started to burn inside me intensified, hardening into something resolute. It wasn't just the money, though that was a significant chunk of my savings. It was the pattern. The lifetime of being second best, of being overlooked, of being told I was too sensitive while Zaylee was indulged. I remembered countless arguments growing up. If Zaylee broke my favorite toy, Mom would say, "She didn't mean it, Aurora. She's just playing." If Zaylee borrowed my clothes and ruined them, it was always, "Zaylee didn't mean it. You have so many clothes, Aurora." If she spread a rumor about me at school, it was, "Zaylee didn't mean it. She's just a child." Always, always, Zaylee didn't mean it. And always, always, I was the one who had to forgive, to understand, to move on. I'd spent years trying to earn my mother's approval, her affection. After Dad died, I thought this was my chance. I'd be the strong one, the provider, the one who kept the family together. I'd buried myself in work, climbing the corporate ladder in tech, sending money home, sacrificing my own life, all with the quiet hope that someday my mother would finally see my worth, that she would finally choose me. But standing on that doorstep, seeing her distant eyes, hearing Zaylee's casual dismissal, I knew. It was never going to happen. Zaylee was, and always would be, her favorite. Ava called later that evening. I told her about Mrs. Henderson and the cosmetic dental work, and then about Zaylee's email with the vendor list. Unbelievable, Ava breathed. Okay, this is solid. We have a case, a very strong case. What now? I asked, my voice flat. Now, you talk to your mom, Ava said. One last time, not to confront her with the evidence, not to accuse, just to see if there's any flicker of the mother you remember, to give her a chance to be honest, even now. It's for you, Aurora, for closure. And it will show a judge you tried to resolve this informally. The thought of facing my mother again after the cold reception made my stomach clench, but Ava was right. I needed to know. I texted Kennedy. Can we get coffee tomorrow morning? Just us. To my surprise, she replied quickly, Okay, the usual place, 9 a.m. The usual place was a small cafe near the house, a spot Dad used to take us for Saturday morning pancakes. It felt like a lifetime ago. The next morning, I arrived early. The cafe was quiet. I ordered 2 cappuccinos, remembering how she used to love them. When she walked in, she looked tired, her shoulders slumped. She was 59, almost 60, and grief had etched lines around her eyes, but there was also a guardedness I hadn't seen before. She slid into the booth opposite me, not meeting my gaze. Aurora, she said, her voice soft, almost hesitant. Hi, Mom, I replied, pushing one of the cappuccinos towards her. It was lukewarm already. We sat in silence for a moment, the clinking of ceramic cups and the low hum of conversation from other tables filling the void. I took a deep breath. Mom, I began, my voice carefully neutral. I've been thinking about moving back home, to the city, I mean. Maybe even into the house if it makes sense. Her head snapped up. Her eyes, usually so expressive, were suddenly cold, guarded. She fidgeted with the sugar packet on the table. Oh, well, that's a big decision, Aurora. It is, I agreed. But I miss being closer to you. And with Sarah in my old room, I was thinking maybe we could look at options. Maybe a small addition? Or if she could find somewhere else? Kennedy cut me off, her voice suddenly sharper, the hesitation gone. No, that won't work. She picked up her cappuccino, took a sip, then set it down with a clatter. Her eyes darted around the cafe, avoiding mine. Sarah's settled, and the house is full. Zaylee and Dawson are here a lot, you know. They need the space. Zaylee and Dawson? I asked, a bitter taste in my mouth. They have their own place, don't they? Well, yes, but they're often over, she said, her voice defensive. And Zaylee needs her space. She's just starting her life, Aurora. She needs stability. She needs us. My heart sank, a heavy, dull thud. It was the same old story. Zaylee's needs always trumped mine. Always. I see, I said, my voice barely a whisper. The lukewarm cappuccino tasted like ash. Kennedy finally looked at me, her eyes holding a strange mix of pity and impatience. Look, Aurora, you've always been so independent. You don't need us like she does. You've always been able to take care of yourself. The words hung in the air, a final, definitive dismissal. You don't need us like she does. It wasn't praise, it was an explanation for why I was always an afterthought. for why my sacrifices were invisible, for why my room was rented out, and my money was spent on a champagne tower, while I sat alone in a motel. The last flicker of hope, of wanting to be chosen, died then. I finally saw it clearly. This wasn't about grief or struggling. This was about favoritism. And I was not the favorite. You've always been so independent. You don't need us like she does. Kennedy's words echoed in my mind as I drove away from the cafe, the lukewarm cappuccino still a bitter taste on my tongue. The last thread of hope, the one that had kept me sending money, kept me sacrificing, finally snapped. There was no misunderstanding, no miscommunication, just a clear, stark preference. I called Ava from the car. She said it, Ava, almost word for word. You don't need us like she does. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. The hurt was still there, a dull ache, but it was now overshadowed by a cold, determined resolve. I'm so sorry, Aurora, Ava said, her voice soft. But now you know, and now we act. What's next? I asked, my grip tight on the steering wheel. Now we send them a legal love letter, Ava replied, her tone shifting from compassionate friend to sharp lawyer. A cease and desist. It's a formal demand for them to stop misappropriating your funds and to return them. It lays out our case clearly, without emotion. It's the first step before a full lawsuit. Over the next few days, Ava and I worked tirelessly. I sent her every single piece of evidence, the bank statements, the emails, the detailed timeline from Ben, Zaley's bragging vendor list, even the note about Mrs. Henderson's casual revelation about the cosmetic dental work. Ava, with her meticulous legal mind, started drafting. She explained the strategy. Civil theft and unjust enrichment. Civil theft, because they had intentionally taken my money through deception, knowing it was for specific purposes, like mortgage, utilities, medical bills, and used it for something else entirely. Unjust enrichment, because they had benefited unfairly at my expense, using my funds to enrich themselves and Zaley's wedding without any legal justification. She also included Philip, my uncle, Kennedy's brother, as a defendant. He had been heavily involved in the wedding planning, and some of the vendor payments had even gone through his account, as Zaley's spreadsheet showed. He was 59, a smooth talker, always seemed to be involved in some opportunity that never quite panned out. He'd always been close with Zaley, indulging her every whim. This isn't just about getting your money back, Aurora, Ava said, her voice firm. It's about holding them accountable. It's about justice. The cease and desist letter was a masterpiece of legal precision. It detailed every transfer, every false pretense, every dollar. It cited the relevant statutes, outlined the potential damages, and demanded full restitution within 30 days, or we would proceed with a full civil lawsuit. It was signed by Ava Simmons, attorney at law. The day the summons arrived was a Tuesday. Kennedy was at her weekly book club brunch at the country club. I pictured it. The clinking of mimosas, the polite chatter, and then a process server walking in, handing her a thick envelope. The image brought a grim satisfaction. My phone started buzzing within minutes. First, a text from a distant cousin. OMG, is it true? Mom just texted the family group chat. Kennedy's being sued? By you? Then another. What is going on, Aurora? Zaley is freaking out. She says you're trying to ruin her life. The chaos was immediate. The whispers spread like wildfire through the extended family network. My phone, which had been mostly silent since I arrived in town, was now a constant stream of notifications. Some were accusatory, shocked, calling me heartless and ungrateful. But then, something else started to happen. Hey, Aurora, I heard. I'm so sorry. I always wondered about that wedding. It seemed a lot. This was from Aunt Carol, my dad's sister, who had always been kind but distant since his passing. Is it true about the house? I heard your mom was struggling.
But then Zaylee had that huge wedding. It didn't add up. This was from a neighbor, Mrs. Davies, who lived 2 doors down. Just wanted to say, I always admired how hard you worked for your family. Don't let anyone tell you you're wrong for standing up for yourself. This one was anonymous, but it felt like a hug. I wasn't alone. People saw it. They had noticed. The quiet resentment that had simmered under the surface of family gatherings for years was finally breaking through. A few days later, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I recognized instantly, but hadn't seen in years. Muhammad Ellis. He was 60s now, a longtime family lawyer, a friend of my father's, who had even babysat me a few times when I was little. He was the one who had handled Dad's estate. He was the family's go-to for anything legal. I answered, my voice steady. Hello, Muhammad. Aurora. His voice was strained, tired. I just received a call from Kennedy and Philip and Zaylee. They've asked me to represent them. But before I do, can we just talk? Can we just talk? Muhammad Ellis's voice, usually so calm and measured, held an undercurrent of genuine distress. He'd been the family lawyer for decades, a quiet, steady presence at every major family event. Now, he was caught in the middle. About what, Muhammad? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. I knew what he wanted to talk about. He wanted to smooth things over, to remind me of family. About this lawsuit, Aurora, he said, his voice pleading. Your mother is distraught. Zaylee is beside herself. This is tearing the family apart. Can't we find a way to resolve this without all this legal action? Muhammad, I said, my voice firm. I've tried to talk. I've tried to resolve things. For 5 years, I've done nothing but support them, financially and emotionally. I came home expecting to surprise my mother for her 60th birthday, and I found my room rented out, my mother cold, and my cousin bragging about spending my money on a bachelorette party. I tried to talk to my mom to see if there was any way forward. She told me I didn't need them like Zaylee did. There's nothing left to talk about informally. A sigh escaped him. Kennedy just wants you to come to the house. She says she wants to explain, to apologize. I hesitated. Go back to that house? The one where I was no longer welcome? The one that had been funded by my sacrifices while they lived large? But then, an idea formed. Okay, Mohammed, I'll come to the house, but not alone, and not to talk. We'll meet them there. The next afternoon, I pulled up to the familiar house. My heart was pounding, a drumbeat of anticipation and a strange, cold calm. Ava was already there, leaning against her sleek black car, a professional briefcase in hand. She gave me a small, reassuring nod. We walked up the porch steps, the same steps I'd run up as a child, the same steps where I'd stood just days ago, a stranger. The door opened before I could knock. Kennedy stood there, her face pale and drawn, her eyes red-rimmed. Behind her, Zaylee stood stiffly, arms crossed, a defiant glare fixed on me. Philip, my uncle, was also there, hovering nervously in the background. Aurora, Kennedy whispered, her voice cracking. She looked at Ava, then back at me, her eyes wide with a desperate plea. I didn't say anything. I just walked past her, Ava at my side, into the living room. The same living room where I'd spent Christmases, birthdays, family dinners. Now it felt like a courtroom. Ava took center stage, her voice clear and authoritative, cutting through the tense silence. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. As you know, Ms. Harris has filed a formal complaint regarding the misappropriation of funds. We are here today to present the evidence and discuss a path forward. She opened her briefcase. Over the past 5 years, Ms. Aurora Harris has transferred a total of $31,450 to Ms. Kennedy Harris's account. These transfers were made under the explicit understanding that they were for household expenses, mortgage payments, utilities, and specific medical needs.
Ava laid out the evidence on the coffee table. Here are the bank statements, clearly showing the dates and amounts of each transfer. She fanned them out, a paper trail of my trust. Here are the email correspondences, where Ms. Kennedy Harris confirmed the need for these funds for specific purposes, such as the mortgage and utility bills. She pointed to specific lines of text. And here, Ava continued, her voice gaining momentum, are the records of a $5,000 transfer explicitly labeled Mom's Dental Surgery. We have a sworn statement from a neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, confirming that Ms. Kennedy Harris underwent cosmetic dental work, not a medical necessity, around the time of Zaylee Lane's wedding. Kennedy gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Zaylee's defiant posture faltered. Philip looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. Furthermore, Ava pressed on, we have Ms. Zaylee Lane's own voluntarily provided wedding vendor list, detailing the extravagant expenses for her wedding to Mr. Dawson Gomez. Our financial investigator has cross-referenced these expenses with the timing of Ms. Aurora Harris's transfers, demonstrating a clear pattern of diversion of funds. She slid over the spreadsheet, its columns of figures a stark indictment. This constitutes civil theft and unjust enrichment, Ava concluded, her gaze sweeping over their stunned faces. The evidence is irrefutable. Kennedy broke down then, sobbing, burying her face in her hands. We were just trying to keep the family afloat, she wailed, her voice muffled. After your father, it was so hard. We didn't mean to. We thought you'd understand. We thought you'd forgive us. We were trying to keep the house. My eyes remained fixed on her, then shifted to Zaylee. My cousin, who had always been so full of herself, so quick with a cutting remark, was now pale, her face deflating under the weight of the legalese and the undeniable bank statements. She looked small, exposed. She didn't say a word. I said nothing. Not a single word. I just watched. I watched my mother crumble, blaming grief, blaming circumstance. I watched my cousin, for the first time in her life, rendered speechless and vulnerable. The silence was my fire. Ava let the silence hang in the air for a moment, letting the full impact sink in. Then, she delivered the final blow. Given the extent of the misappropriation and the lack of a good faith effort to resolve this prior to legal action, Ava stated, her voice cold and clear, we are filing for a lien on this property. Kennedy's head snapped up, her eyes wide with terror. Philip blanched. Zaylee whimpered. This house, Ava explained, gesturing around the living room, could be forcibly sold if restitution isn't made. This house could be forcibly sold if restitution isn't made. Ava's words hung in the air, a death knell for the illusion of family harmony. Kennedy's face crumpled, a soundless cry escaping her lips. Zaylee, for once, looked utterly defeated, her usual smugness replaced by genuine fear. Philip, who had been trying to fade into the wallpaper, now looked like a ghost. I still said nothing. I just watched. The silence was my shield, my weapon. It allowed the weight of Ava's words, backed by the stacks of evidence on the coffee table, to settle heavily on them. The news spread like wildfire. The family fractures publicly. It started as whispers, then became full-blown gossip. Kennedy Harris is being sued by her own daughter, Aurora. The phrase bounced around the family group chats, the neighborhood Facebook groups, even the local coffee shop. Some distant relatives, those who had always been closer to Zaylee, or who valued keeping up appearances above all else, messaged me, calling me heartless, ungrateful, cold. They accused me of tearing the family apart, of disrespecting my mother. But then, the other messages started pouring in. From Aunt Carol, my dad's sister. I always knew something was off. So proud of you, Aurora, for standing up for yourself. From Mrs. Davies, the neighbor. I'm so sorry, dear.
I always thought your mother was struggling, but that wedding, it just didn't make sense. Even a few old high school friends I hadn't spoken to in years reached out, offering support, sharing stories of their own family dramas. I wasn't alone. The public humiliation they were experiencing was a mirror of the quiet humiliation I'd lived with for years. The fallout wasn't limited to the family. Zaylee's marriage to Dawson Gomez, which had seemed so picture-perfect on Instagram, began to implode. Dawson, 34, charming but financially unstable, had been completely in the dark about how the wedding was truly funded. He'd always assumed Zaylee's family, particularly Uncle Philip, had footed the bill. When the lawsuit became public and the details of the misappropriated funds came out, he was furious. He hadn't signed up for a marriage built on fraud. He hadn't signed up for his new wife to be publicly exposed as a liar and a thief. He filed for separation within weeks. Zaylee's dream wedding, paid for with my money, became the very thing that destroyed her marriage. Muhammad Ellis, the longtime family lawyer, found himself in an impossible position. He'd known my father. He'd known me since I was a child. He couldn't ethically represent a case where the evidence was so overwhelmingly against his clients and where his personal connection to me might be compromised. He resigned from representing Kennedy, Zaylee, and Philip, citing a conflict of interest. It was a quiet, professional withdrawal, but it sent a clear message. Even the family's trusted lawyer saw the writing on the wall. The legal process moved forward. There were court dates, motions, and eventually, a mandatory mediation session. I sat across from them in a sterile conference room, Ava by my side. Kennedy looked defeated, Zaylee looked sullen, and Philip looked utterly miserable. Their new lawyer, a younger, less experienced man, looked overwhelmed. The mediator, a stern but fair woman, guided the conversation. Ava presented our case again, calmly, factually. The evidence was undeniable. The bank statements, the emails, Zaylee's own vendor list, the sworn statements. There was no defense. Kennedy, under oath, was forced to admit the truth. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it was clear on the recording. I did use the money for other things. For the house, yes, but also for Zaylee's wedding. And my teeth. I always thought she'd forgive me. She always did. The words hit me, not with a fresh wave of pain, but with a chilling clarity. She always did. That was it. That was the core of it all. My forgiveness had been their endless well, their endless justification. My loyalty, my independence, my willingness to sacrifice had been taken for granted, twisted into a weapon against me. The mediation concluded with a settlement in my favor. The exact amount was agreed upon, a significant portion of what I had sent, plus legal fees. The lien on the house would be lifted upon payment. It wasn't about getting every last cent back. It was about the acknowledgement, the public record, the undeniable truth. I walked out of that mediation room feeling strangely hollow, but also lighter than I had in years. The battle was won, not with shouting or tears, but with paper, with facts, with a quiet, unwavering resolve. The familial ties were scorched beyond repair, but the silence I had maintained throughout the process had been my greatest strength. It was the sound of karma, quiet and brutal. The restitution money hit my account a few weeks after the mediation. It wasn't the full $31,450 I'd sent over 5 years, but it was a substantial amount, enough to cover a significant down payment on a place of my own finally. Ava had negotiated a fair settlement, accounting for legal fees and a portion of the emotional distress. It was a victory, quiet but undeniable. I didn't linger in my hometown. The motel room had felt temporary, a stark reminder of my displaced status. The air in that town, once so familiar, now felt heavy with judgment, and the ghosts of expectations I'd finally shed.
I spent a few days with Ava, processing everything, then started looking for a condo in a neighboring city, about an hour's drive away. It was far enough to feel like a clean break, close enough if I ever chose to visit. The process of finding a place, securing a mortgage, and moving in became a quiet ritual of reclaiming my life. I bought a small, modern condo with a balcony that overlooked a park. The first time I unlocked my own front door, a key that actually worked, a profound sense of peace settled over me. This was mine. No one could rent it out from under me. No one could claim I didn't need it. I used a portion of the restitution for the down payment, and the rest I invested, a tangible symbol of my renewed financial independence. One afternoon, sitting on my new sofa, a box of old photos beside me, I went through my phone. I scrolled through my contacts, seeing names that once meant everything. Kennedy, Zaley, Philip. With a deep breath, I selected each one and hit delete. It wasn't done in anger, but with a quiet certainty. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to salvage. The scorched earth of our relationship offered no ground for new growth. I paused when I saw my dad's name. His number was disconnected, of course. But there was one voicemail, saved from years ago. Just a casual, "Hey kiddo, just calling to say I love you. Call me back when you get a chance." His voice, warm and steady, was a lifeline to a past that felt impossibly far away. I kept that one. It was a reminder of what real love felt like, what real family was supposed to be. News filtered back to me, as it always does in small circles. Zaley's marriage to Dawson had officially ended. He'd moved out, and the divorce was proceeding. She'd moved back in with her parents, into the house I'd helped save, the house that had been the stage for her lavish wedding. Her Instagram, once a shrine to her perfect life and that extravagant wedding, was gone. No more champagne towers, no more horse-drawn carriages, just silence. I felt no satisfaction, only a quiet acknowledgement of consequences. A few months later, a small cream-colored envelope arrived in my mailbox. My name and new address were scrawled in Kennedy's familiar hand. Inside was a short card, a generic floral design. "We miss you. Hope you're okay. Love, Mom." It was unsigned, but I knew it was from her. There was no apology, no mention of the past, just those 4 simple words. "We miss you. Hope you're okay." A quiet attempt to bridge the chasm she had helped create. I held the card for a long moment, tracing the embossed flowers with my thumb. I thought about the years of sacrifice, the quiet hope, the crushing disappointment. I thought about her distant eyes, Zaley's smugness, the rented room, the bachelorette party, the cosmetic dental work. I thought about her words, "You don't need us like she does." I placed the card on the kitchen counter. It stayed there for a day, then 2. Then I picked it up, walked to the recycling bin, and dropped it in. I never replied. They called me cold, not wrong. But warmth doesn't survive in a house that only burns you.